special edition of Modern Symposium. Now, if you notice that the production quality looks a lot better this time, you can thank this handsome gentleman to my right. This is Nick Osti. He's helping us out with the cameras today. We're having a little fun with it today. It's an election special. Maybe I should call it the pre-Civil War special. So, Richie, you got anything to start us off with?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing who the next president is, if we have one. Got a lot of tension going on right now. Halloween coming up, exciting times, and no better place than Modern Symposium to hear what the people are talking about and kind of debate the ideas. So,
I'm the impartial moderator this evening.
Yeah, we have me and Richie in costume here, and Nick just showed up, try to help us out a little bit.
I'm the fact checker. I'm the live fact checker.
Fact checker, moderator. I might throw some additional input here and there in case anyone's sick of hearing, me and Camhole's talking constantly all the time. We got at least another voice, so that's good at least.
Got a couple people behind the scenes helping us out, so thanks to them as well.
A couple of wenches. Yeah.
A couple wenches here, yeah.
So start us off here, maybe with a little October surprise action, right? Everyone's saying, oh, what's it gonna be? And for the most part, it's kind of seemed like it's almost nothing, October surprise is Donald Trump is still Hitler.
Yeah, Trump is Hitler again. So just for a little bit of a kind of a history on the October surprise. So 2016, I believe it was the Hollywood Access tape where Trump came out with the locker room talk thing. Everyone thought it was gonna end his career, or end his political career at least. And shortly afterwards, the Hillary Clinton WikiLeaks thing came out where it showed that she was, doing all this kind of shady stuff behind the scenes, deleting emails, that type of thing. End of October, obviously right before the election. Then 2020, 2020, it was the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yep.
Was a big story on Biden, and then the FBI shut it down as Russian misinformation. Turned out to be true, and then at the same time, in response to that, I believe it was when Trump's tax returns came out, and it showed that he went many years without paying any taxes, and so that was kind of big bombshell items, and we're sitting around waiting for the big bombshell items, and like you said, it was Trump is Hitler again, and a couple kind of nonsense stories, and nothing really that was big enough to I don't think sway anyone's vote. So.
No, and here's the thing, people are saying, oh, this is crazy. Trump is actively quoting Hitler. It's like, all right, if all of the stuff that he's done before hasn't dissuaded people from voting for this man, I don't think that these quotes are going to dissuade people anyways. I texted something like that to you. I remember you responded something along the lines of, the left says, Trump supporters are still going to go out and vote Trump because they agree with all this fascist, racist statements. And you said, if you just cut out because they don't believe all of these stories coming out, then it would be correct.
Right, yeah. I think from the right-wing perspective here, it is not that it's like, the left tries to pin the right as, these people are okay with this racism, supporting Hitler, kind of sexual assault, whatever the case of the day is. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think the right, it's not that they're okay with it, it's that they don't believe it, which I don't blame them because the media has done a very good job at constantly coming out with these type of stories about them that continue to be disproven or debunked. And with the one, the recent one, it was, he said something good about Hitler. I believe he said Hitler had good generals, or I wish I had generals like Hitler had. That was a quote that was overheard by, I think it was one or two people who came out and said that they heard it. Now, there was no evidence, no video, no nothing, and there's been tons of these stories about the same thing.
Got to break in there. I believe that was his former chief of staff,
John Kelly, right? Who was who was the same guy who said that Trump called the veterans who died suckers and losers last year, right? Yeah. Which was then further debunked, or at least not disproven by a bunch of people who were supposedly there and heard it and were witness. They all said, no, I didn't hear that. So whether he said it or not, it's possible he did say, it's possible that he didn't. I'm not saying one or the other is for sure, but I'm saying that this guy is very clearly an anti-Trump guy. He's very clearly looking for things to pull out to interfere with the election, which is why he comes out with it 2 weeks before the election. So I don't think that's a legitimate enough story to actually smear Trump's reputation, assuming that he did still have any, even if it is true, it's not coming from a source that is trustworthy. And I think that means a lot. If it was on video of him saying that, I think it'd be a whole different story.
Yeah, potentially. Let me ask you this. why is it that the vast majority of Trump's former staff are not supporting him, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It could be that he is very bad to work with, which I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I know a lot of people who are in positions like that are rough to work with. You know, like Elon is an example. There's tons of people who've worked with him said, like, this guy sucks to work with. It could be that, you know, they working together in a high stakes situation where this guy is in charge and you're used to having kind of politicians in charge, and now you're all of a sudden you get this businessman who is, you know, all about making it fast and cheap and it picks up the intensity where disagreements could erupt. I'm not saying that the guy is wrong about Trump's character or, you know, his way of operating or any of the people who've said anything about him, but I just don't think I don't see it being a trustworthy source in the sense where it must be true, or in the sense where even if this guy doesn't like Trump or all of these other people who've worked with him don't like him, could that be a good thing? Could it be that none of these people like working with him because he has extremely high standards and he holds everyone accountable and he doesn't let anyone get away with any bullshit behind the scenes when you've got the American people on the line as the people you're supposed to be serving?
What's more likely, though, that I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it's something around like 80-90% of his former staff are not supporting him. Do you think it's more likely that these people can't hang with Trump?
I think it's probably some of them,
Or do you think it's the fact that they realize this man is not a capable leader?
Did you see what he just said on Joe Rogan's podcast about this?
I did not, actually. I did listen to the podcast.
You listened to it, right?
So yeah, I don't remember this, though.
He talked about the people that he brought on, for the most part, were suggestions based on other people that he didn't know, but there's so many positions that he has to fill that he has to take people's word for it, essentially. So like somebody who he trusts says, oh, I want to bring in this person. So he's kind of going through like a chain of referrals. And he also said that there was somebody from New York. I forgot who he said what position it was, but he said, because Rogan asked him something like that, like, you know, what do you think about people who like aren't coming back to, you know, be a part of, you know, your campaign and stuff like that? And he was saying essentially that anybody who could have that offer would take it immediately. And they're going to say, oh, no, I don't want it. I don't want to be a part of it. But like presented the opportunity that they would actually take it. So
could it also be, I'd say, would you say that the incentive, you know, the whole idea of a whistleblower, right, is you know, oh, they're so brave, you know,
right.
They come out against the system, and that it's. Would you not say that there is a very hardline incentive right now to come out and say something about Trump that would be demeaning to his character or reputation or whatever they can get on him? I mean, it's not like John Kelly, for example, is gonna, oh my God, like he's took such a big risk, he's so brave for coming out. The entire media infrastructure is begging people who've probably formerly worked with Trump or know Trump. They're being begged, please give me something that we can use against Trump, and that's been the case for a long time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure those people who were in the campaign office with him, who are no longer with him, I'm sure they've gotten approached by a million different outlets saying like, hey, can I get a soundbite? Can I get an interview? Like, I want something that I can go public with, right? And, you know, maybe to a certain extent that could be the case. I just don't really see how you go from like, oh, I hire all the best people to I had to fire all of these people because they're all incompetent.
Right, no, and believe me, I see what you're saying there, where Trump's hyperbolic way of speaking is just, you know, that part is just kind of a meme of like, yeah, that's pretty good actually. I hire all the best people except for all of those guys I hired that are.
Except for all the people who are no longer with
Yeah,
him.
anyone, right. And that's what, and he even knows that too when he talks. He says, he said something in the podcast too that was like, oh yeah, the polls. He's like, I'll never trust the polls. I hate the polls. The polls have always been wrong, except for this time they've got me up. So I actually like this one. These ones are pretty good, but the rest of them have been terrible. You know, so it's one of those kind of. Would you say that? Do you think? I know the whole Trump is a fascist thing has been in the news. Do you think that he fits that definition at all?
It's a pretty good question. If those quote about Hitler are true, very possibly. I have seen, literally he's on the campaign trail right now, using phrases such as, immigrants are soiling the blood of our nation. That is directly taken from totalitarian leaders of the past century.
Okay, but that's not fascist at all. That has nothing to do with fascism, I don't think. I guess.
If you're quoting fascists.
Well, should we should we define fascist though? I mean,
do you know what the definition of fascist is?
You want to ask the overlords real quick?
I got you guys.
It's as far.
It has nothing to do with immigrants. I'll tell you that.
As far right as you can go. So communism is as far left as you can go. Fascism is as far right as you can go. This is just the definition of fascism.
I did not think it had anything to do with right or left. Like Stalin was a fascist. I don't think it has anything to do with right or left. I think it's about the methods used to obtain your. So like a fascist is someone who controls the media, controls the means of transportation, controls the money supply, and controls the military in a way where, you know, they're like someone who receives 85, 86% of negative news coverage by definition cannot be a fascist, because like Hitler was a fascist not because he was far right, but because he controlled centrally the media so that he was pumping out fake information to everybody.
Hold on, we got a live fact check.
Don't believe that to be true. What do we got?
Fascist is someone who supports an authoritarian nationalist system that emphasizes dictatorial control and suppresses opposition.
Thoughts?
Okay, I mean, it doesn't give much. I think it does give. I think that. I mean, that's a very vague definition, but I think it does fit where it's not necessarily a right or left leaning. Like Stalin was considered a fascist, Mao was considered a fascist because they suppressed the opposition. They censored people any dissenters were either killed, put in a gulag, censored.
Now let me say this: 2016, Trump's presidency. There's nothing fascist about it.
No fascism.
Like absolutely not, right?
That's what I mean. I think just saying too, and I think when people are under the impression that Trump is a fascist, it's not. I'm not blaming I'm not saying like, oh, you're wrong. I get why you would think that because of what you're saying. He does have the kind of charisma and he fits the view. You know, he looks like a Mussolini. He acts like a Mussolini. He acts like a Hitler.
He quotes them.
Yeah, right. but I have the reason I think the right gets frustrated with this is because you've got one side who is receiving 85% negative news coverage, who the other side is using the DOJ, weaponizing the DOJ to try to imprison their political opponents, and they're censoring people who are trying to speak, censoring press, censoring freedom of speech from big name outlets such as Trump himself, who was kicked off of all of social media. That is much more fascist than anything that Trump's ever done. So when it comes to like actual policies, actual actions, you can see why that's frustrating to someone on the right who was like, are you kidding me? They're calling Trump a fascist, but they're actually taking steps that a fascist would take rather than Trump, who kind of just talks like one.
Yeah, no, I mean, you understand. I can absolutely see that frustration, right? Like that makes a lot of sense. One other thing I'd want to point to, it's going back to his rhetoric on immigration. I have this in my notes. I'm going to pull it up. I believe it is the Alien Enemy Act of 1798. Have you seen him quoting this?
No, I haven't seen this.
All right, he says he wants to use the Alien Enemy Act of 1798, which was notorious for its role in Japanese internment camps in World War II.
That doesn't sound great.
Yeah, and this is that's the principle that he wants to act on to basically round up immigrants and
just
kick them
mass
out.
deportation.
And that's the political
I guess
basis.
what is it about that makes, you know what I mean? What is the... Why does he have to use that
camps
one?
in World War II were a horrific thing by us.
No, I know that, but I'm saying, okay, you said that was 1798.
Yeah.
So World War II was 150 years later.
Yeah.
What was the act? You know, what is the act? Like, what is the...
What is that act?
Yeah, what is that act? Yeah.
It's for like any foreign foreign nations like on our land in acts of wartime. I believe it's supposed to be. It grants the government more power to like essentially do whatever they want with people.
Did you say 1978 or
1798?
1798?
Yeah.
I gotta fact check that.
Yeah, we'll take a fact check. I mean, I've never heard of that one, and I didn't see him quote it, but I mean, that's what I mean. There's so many of these where they do, and this is partially on, I think, on the left media, is there's so many of these where it's like, it doesn't even, like that could be a very terrible thing he said, or it could not be. I have no way of knowing, you know.
Well, that's the issue, is that all of my feed is filled with this,
right,
and all of your feed is filled with completely different things.
My feed is usually filled with people debunking the stuff that's on your feed, probably, and then I'm sure yours is probably filled with people debunking the far right stuff about Kamala. You know, it's the same thing.
So then I think I've probably said this before in past episodes, we're working on two different information sets. Mm-hmm. And that's why this sort of dialogue is so hard to have for most people.
Right.
That's why when you're sitting around at Thanksgiving and Christmas and you're whatever, your conservative uncle starts going off, everyone's like, oh God, not this again.
Yeah, right. And
because we can't have a legitimate conversation because we're working with completely different sets of information.
Yes, exactly. And it's building up frustration too, which is why it's almost like a snowball effect where it keeps getting worse and worse, because it's like the conservative uncle is a good one where like this guy, saw something on his feed that seemed right to him, and then someone else said, everyone else around him doesn't seem to have seen this.
Right.
And so he's frustrated that like people aren't believing him or aren't listening to him, and it's like, but that's because they're seeing the other stuff and you're not believing them, and it's just a kind of like a battle. It's like a escalation almost, where everyone's getting more and more frustrated. No one, like, these people are so dumb over here, or these people are so terrible over here that look at what they're doing, and things get twisted out of proportion, and it becomes a kind of a Cold War. I would almost say we're in a bit of a Cold War. A civil Cold War.
Right before the hot war.
Right, yeah, right, and yeah, that's usually what comes after the Cold War.
Do we get a fact check?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
Here's another one I was going to bring up, kind of along this line of two different information sets. I don't know if you've seen this or not. Trump has referred to using the U.S. military on its own citizens, right?
I did see something about that, yes.
So that's a pretty scary thought.
Is it scary, or is the local gangs here in Chicago right outside this window scarier?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point as well, actually.
I'd be more scared of the U.S. military.
Well, yeah, I would as a person, but
crimes? Are you someone in your day-to-day life where you feel like you would even encounter them if they were here?
Context is everything too. Like that could be, oh yeah, he's gonna just use the military to oppress everyone, or it could be the fact that I think there's like 200. I might be botching the numbers. I don't want to do any fake news, but I believe there's about 240,000 gang members in Chicago. There's about 60,000 cops. So it's like,
Don't forget about the migrants now too.
Yeah, right. So that's a good point. But sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that was it. I was just going to add to it and just say there's more than just the local gangs now. Even
I had a part two of that though. So Trump said he said using the National Guard or even the military. The left's blowing that up totally, right? Mm-hmm. Then I saw something. I haven't been able to dig in and see if this is true or not. I saw that the Biden-Harris administration a few weeks back had actually passed a new law, maybe not a law, whatever, they can get around it with a million different ways, like some official act or whatever, a law allowing the U.S. military to aid local police, and the caveat that they made on it was they can now use it's something like they can now use like violent means against citizens. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's kind of like
the same thing.
It's kind of what you were saying, like, they're calling Trump a fascist. They're saying, Trump's going to turn the military against you. Disregard the fact that we just passed a law saying we can now use the military against you.
That's the thing too, right. Is that Trump was already president for 4 years, and I believe he did call in the National Guard during the the George Floyd time when everyone was rioting and stuff. I think he did try to call in the National Guard, but he was already president for 4 years, and so there's all this talk about like, and he's always said, look, I'm not saying like he's the smartest, most savvy guy when it comes to what he says. He says shit like this all the time, and it's not good either. Like that's one of the bad things about him. But it's like, all right, the way that they hype it up is if, okay, this guy is, literally Orange Hitler who's going to come in, he's going to have the U.S. military at your door, and if you're not, a MAGA Republican, then you're going to get sent to an internment. It's like, I don't think he's going to do any of that, because why would he do that? Why wouldn't he have, if he was, why wouldn't he have done it the last time? I don't think any of it really makes that much sense. And I think when it comes to actual actions that are causing problems, that are being written into legislation, I see just as much, if not more, on the other side. When it comes to kind of the oppressing of speech is a big one. I know we already talked about that one, so we don't got to go back down that one. But even, the fact that Trump has, 27 cases or something right now on him that were by the Department of Justice that he was charged with while running a campaign against the current administration. That right there, it's like there's a reason why no former president has ever been charged with a federal criminal case. It's not because they're all squeaky clean, good Samaritans, Mother Teresa's out here who never did anything wrong. It's because that was a good precedent that was set, so that way, if we just kind of agree upon we're not going to charge former presidents with these federal crimes, then that way it's not like you can imprison your political opponents. That precedent was broken this time, not by Trump, but by the current administration.
Let me cut in. Mother Teresa not the saint everyone thinks her to be.
Really?
Yeah, no.
I don't know much about
dude,
Mother
Yeah,
Teresa.
she's
but-
not the,
No,
not the
she
best.
all the money that she got didn't go to like poor people. It went towards like building churches, and yeah, like she wasn't a big fan of like poor people. Actually, she was a fan of suffering. She thought that suffering was close to like Christ. So
she was just purposely suffering to become closer to Christ. You think?
no, she was
wasn't
spending
really
time
suffering
with
as
people
much.
who were
Oh,
suffering.
okay, yeah. Gotcha.
A little bit off topic. Let me ask you this: how do you feel about Trump's mental faculties? Do you think you're seeing a dip there? Are you? At
I
all
would definitely
concerned?
say, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say he's not as sharp as he was in 2016. I don't think. But that being said, it's like okay, but I think he's still pretty sharp compared to what do we got now? You know, I think he's much sharper than Biden for sure. That was on display. And
Give it 4
but that's
years.
not saying much.
Give it
That's not
4
saying
years.
much.
He's already looking slower in these interviews. Joe
Yeah.
Rogan's having to bring him back onto topic because he can't answer a question.
yeah, it's not even-
He does the weave, which is
He's
just,
doing the weave,
Which
yeah,
is
he's
just
doing
dementia.
The weave,
Which
the
is just
weave.
dementia.
The weave. All right, I'm not a fan of the weave. I'll give you that one because he keeps talking about the weave, but he was doing that in the Joe Rogan too, where he's like, yeah, I can do the weave, but it's mostly that he can't get to the point, and so he kind of he goes on these tangents, and so yeah, I mean he's definitely not as sharp as he was. But I mean, I wouldn't say that Kamala's any sharper. I don't think I've seen a politician in the past 12 years that was actually had a good shot at getting the nomination, whether Republican or Democrat, who could keep up with Trump when it comes to who's sharp. I mean, maybe I don't know. Okay, there's probably a couple, but
Wait,
I mean,
say that again. You don't know what?
like when it comes to political primaries, whether Democrat or Republican, look at. There's plenty of politicians who are on those stages in the debates who aren't as sharp as Trump is now.
Obama was pretty.
Obama
damn
was
good.
very sharp.
Yeah.
He still is very sharp.
Yeah.
I'll give him that one. I don't think that Elizabeth Warren.
No.
Trump is sharper than her. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, Bernie is a good example. I think Trump is sharper than Bernie. I'll give him that. But
Bernie's a pretty sharp dude, I think.
it's not that.
Dude's like 88 and he still got it. He's still
I'm
going
not.
off.
I'm not even dissing Bernie
Yeah.
on his sharpness. I think for an 88-year-old guy, he still got it.
He's still
but
got
I would
it,
say, I mean,
yeah.
what's Trump? I think Trump's 78, 79.
78, I think. I don't know how old Bernie is. He's 84 something.
Look, I would trust Trump behind the wheel. I'd put it that. You know, like if Trump was like behind the wheel of a car, I would trust that he can get us to our destination safely. Whereas if like Biden, if I got in an Uber and Biden was the driver, I would probably just
What?
be
What?
like, yeah, like let's get the hell out of here.
Where? No, that's
I don't
pretty
know.
good.
But Nasi, so you're a less political guy than we are. What are you seeing from like the spectator kind of casual viewer perspective, rather than someone who's like me and Camels who are just constantly looking at this shit all the time?
Okay, so first-hand experience, I was going to get some ramen. As I was pulling into the parking lot, I saw from the back of somebody's window, their car window, it had written in chalk, like you're going to like a football game in high school, right? And they got like their team on there, like go like T-Bolts, go Tigers, whatever. This one was a drawing of Trump, and it said, "Trump loves Hitler, therefore so do his voters." So,
And this is kind of what we were talking about, right? Like a little bit earlier. Like, they don't agree with that aspect. They just agree with the fact that they don't really think that this is true.
Right.
well, yeah. So that's kind of the start of it. Is like you go about your day-to-day life here in 2024. If you really want to like set the stage, right? You can see these common occurrences where people are, I don't want to like insult them, but you can see that like mentally they're probably not all there, just in my opinion, right? Like I see somebody that has something like that written on the back of their car. It's a pretty hard stance, but they're so like public about it, right?
You're saying just the public radicalism is,
Yeah, being politically radicalized is now socially acceptable, essentially.
A lot of people, their identity is, I am on Trump's side or I very much hate Trump. And it's like, that's their whole identity. When I went to the Halloween store to get this nice Trump wig here, I got booed out of the store because I threw it up there, and then the cashier was just like, boo. And a couple people behind me were like, boo. They're giving me a hard time about it. I was like, come on, it's for a podcast. It's for a symposium,
Yeah.
I tried to plug our podcast, but they weren't listening to me.
Me and Rich were
sure they won't.
talking about this the other day. I found a tweet that I really liked. It said, most people are woefully uninformed on politics, And at the same time, politics probably plays far too central a role in our day-to-day lives. Meaning, we now have politics as entertainment as opposed to politics as governance. Politics should not be something that people sit around and like yell at each other about, right? Mm-hmm. It should be this. You know, this is politics, right? Politics is not everyone who supports Trump is Hitler, and anyone who supports Kamala, I don't know, what do they say?
Stalin, or there's a Marxist.
Is a communist who doesn't believe in meritocracy, that believes that everyone should just get everything, no matter if you just sit on your ass 24/7 and do drugs, right?
Yeah. Another example too. Last weekend, I was in the city, just right in the middle of the city of Chicago, and taking down, I forgot, it might have been just like LaSalle Street or something. It was a main street right in the middle of the city. There was a car with speakers on it, like amp speakers, you know, just like massive speakers on the back of this truck, and just a full line of a Palestinian protest. Right, it's just a Saturday afternoon. And there's nothing really wrong with peaceful protest, but it's the things that they're screaming on the mic was like, you know, like, your family members are dying of cancer because the money is being sent to Israel, and it's just like you're listening to.
I might not disagree with that.
I mean, I'd like to hear your points, but
I'll say I don't fully disagree with it either. But I wouldn't be hanging out the roof of a car screaming at noon on a Tuesday.
These radical, like, you know, in my opinion, ideas, but also the way that they're being expressed. It doesn't feel like it's landing to me. Like, okay, so that person's saying that on the street. They're writing it on the back of their car window. These are extreme things. But me as someone who's maybe not the most politically like charged, when I see that, I kind of look at them and think that they might be mentally
just losing it a little bit.
I just wonder, like, as they go through their day-to-day life, what inspires someone to become that, you know, radicalized. And I understand people who are maybe have family in Palestine.
I was gonna say probably tens of thousands of dead Palestinians.
I mean, I'm guessing at that point too, it's probably a very like you know, it's not like somebody showed up. It's probably a very organized hierarchy.
Maybe I can't understand that or relate to that because I don't have, you know, a horse in the race. I understand that it's bad overall, but like at the same time, I just wonder like how people are protesting and expressing these ideas. I've never been a firm believer that protesting really works as well. Like, I don't know, like the way you communicate.
One, actually, I'm not too.
Protesting works.
That's what I mean.
But the people who are just in Chicago protesting like that, and after they did that, what changed?
What is
how many intersections?
I mean, the Million Man March on Washington during the Civil Rights Movement. I think that affected some change.
I guess what is it about protesting that works?
This is an international thing with Israel and Palestine. I know the U.S. has involvement, but every time a bombing happens and they take out people in Hamas, the U.S. says, "Hey guys, we didn't do anything. It wasn't us. We just informed Israel of where they were hiding."
And we
out
just
at.
gave them the bombs.
I mean, they do say that like
they gave them the bombs too, but you know.
I think a lot of it too is like there's people at work and stuff that I mean where they're like, yeah, I can't get to work in the morning because I'm being blocked by a bunch of Palestine protesters who are blocking off the highway, or a bunch of climate change protesters who are blocking off the highway, and it's like. A lot of those people are now like, fuck these people. I am now gonna, you know, a lot of people are just normal guys trying to get to work, and they see, oh, we got a bunch of pro-Palestinians not letting me do my day-to-day life, and so now I don't know anything about it, but I don't like them, so I'm gonna go to the other side. But a genuine question, not like a gotcha or anything, is I don't understand what it is about protesting.
Work?
Yeah, like what is it? What is the goal of the protest, and like in what types of protests work the best? You know, what you probably have a little bit more knowledge on that than I do.
Yeah, honestly, I would say, what is the purpose of a protest? It's basically to show the force of a population. You know, that's our only form of, you know, political influence, is many people gathering together at one time and saying, this is not right. Mm-hmm. It's a show of force by the population. It's 1 million people walking on Washington, D.C. and saying, something has to change.
Just the strength in numbers.
Yeah.
Kind of. I could see that on certain issues. Like the climate change one, I think protests could work for sure because but it's also, I guess in a capitalist society, it is tough because I think the best way to protest is like a boycott. You know, I feel like boycotts work.
that's a good-
You know, like
Voting with your dollar.
voting with your dollar, that might be voting with your
better.
dollar might be more valuable than voting with your voice.
I think
kind of,
that's
in some
what
cases.
my point is overall is that I feel like it's just displaced over and over again, and like people have these strong feelings, and they either don't know how, or they're just not thinking about it hard enough to like put that energy towards an action item, right? I feel like it's sort of just like misguided, it's undirected, and I don't understand, just as an average person walking down the sidewalk who I don't know about Israel, I don't know about Palestine, they're shouting these things on the sidewalk, it's getting my attention, but I'm questioning, what do I do with this information? I don't know, right? Like, I don't know.
It's almost like lack of information because it's just like a slogan being yelled at you. I don't even know what it means sometimes.
Yeah.
Let me bring up voting with your dollar. It can be effective, I agree. But let me bring this up. 50%, or I think it's more, of Americans cannot afford a $1,000 unexpected bill.
True.
So, say I want to vote with my dollar, but I'm pretty broke. I can't really afford to not go to Walmart. I can't really afford to not buy like the cheapest things. I can't afford to vote with my dollar at a mom and pop store where the prices are more expensive.
So in that case, you would be able to afford to take a day off of work and spend it yelling things in the streets?
No.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? That's one thing too, is that I always think, because normally I see these protesters when I'm like taking my lunch break or something, and it's like, yeah, these people are out here for days and days, if like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but meanwhile these are the same people that are saying, oh, we need to bring down capitalism because it's unfair and
How do they
it's
survive?
unequal, and it's like okay, but here I am, I'm the guy who's working all of these hours, and they're saying that, oh yeah, capitalism is unfair because we're having trouble surviving. Meanwhile, they're doing something unproductive all day for days in a row, for many days. That part is kind of frustrating to someone who's on the more capitalist side of it, which is like the idea of protesting with your dollar versus protesting with your voice is they kind of are the same thing, because if you spend the day protesting versus you spend the day making some extra cash and then you use that cash to fund, to vote with that for something that you're supporting or not vote for something that you're against, I feel like that would be a more valuable use of your time. At the end of the day, time is money, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
Good point, Donnie.
There you go. Hey,
I've been
that from the best.
I've been
Rudy G.
drilling you a little bit on Trump. You got anything for me?
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that you're not like a big Kamala guy, really. You're more of an anti-Trump guy, I would
I'll
say.
be voting third party.
Yeah, right. And I think
Green
that's
Party.
what most people are, is it's basically...
Also, let me just say, we live in Illinois. Probably everyone listening lives in Illinois at this point.
Our votes don't matter that much.
Our vote really doesn't matter. People say, oh, you're voting third party, you're throwing your vote away. No, my vote actually might mean something. If they get enough votes, they'll be able to get more political fundraising in the next election cycle. They qualify for more funds. Maybe we can break this duopoly. You vote red or blue in Illinois,
Yeah.
doesn't matter to you. Right?
Yeah, no, that is very true. The voting third party, I think, definitely matters more than voting red or blue.
But I'm not a huge Kamala guy. What was the question you were lining up, though?
Well, I was gonna go. So it's not really. I was just gonna word it this way, rather than saying, "Are you for Kamala or Trump?" It's more of like it's kind of been this way for 3 years now too. It's, are you for Trump or against Trump?
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge Trump guy. I'm not out in the rallies or anything. But I'll probably throw my support behind Trump in this election.
Probably.
Probably, depending on, we'll see what happens the next. Some more,
I'm kind of leaning towards Trump just a little bit.
some more October
Typical
surprises.
undecided voter, right?
Typical
Right.
undecided. I'll probably throw my support behind him. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to make any commitments right now. We still got a couple weeks here, but yeah. I mean, I guess what is the number one thing, if you had to sum it up, as to why you are for Trump or against Trump? And I have a hard time answering this one, honestly, just because it's tough. It's tough to even say because it's not like a single policy. I think at the end of the day, mine is along the lines of, yeah, you do have a guy who's kind of an arrogant asshole, for lack of a better term, but at the end of the day, you don't have someone, there's a certain quality, I don't even know what the word is, it's kind of like hypocritical or phony, whereas you have people who are just throwing jabs at Trump constantly. They have the whole media behind him, they have the whole establishment behind him, but then they're calling him Hitler, they're calling him a fascist, they're saying how terrible would he be for democracy. Meanwhile, they're the ones who are actually like Kamala is saying Trump's a threat to democracy. She received no votes in the primary. It's like
That's a good point.
There's so much hypocrisy from the left that I see, and I think my vote for Trump is less of a vote in support of everything Trump stands for, but more of an anti-establishment vote, more of a protest vote against the current establishment politicians that we have. That's kind of my summary of why I think Trump's the right guy.
I get that argument in 2016. Right? Like, oh, this guy's coming from outside. He's going to run America like a business, like he's going to trim the fat. He's going to drain the swamp, I think like when he first announced in 2015, I was like, oh, this could be good, right? Like an outsider coming in, hasn't been sullied by 30 years of, playing the game. Like maybe he's not completely bought and sold. I think that's a valid argument 8 years ago, right? My main thing on Trump is basically I think it's a character issue. I don't think that man is fit to hold the highest office, especially when you consider the fact that the president really doesn't have all that much political power. The president is really more of a figurehead, right? The president is supposed to be, I think now their biggest facet of what they actually do is like foreign relations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that having someone like Kamala would be a better representation of America than someone like Trump.
Okay, I think that's a fair point, actually. I was going to say earlier, too, that if I did have to pick, if I had to take a look at what's the cause of some of the problems, as much as I am leaning towards Trump, I do think that he is a root cause of a lot of the problems for exactly what you mentioned earlier, which is politics used to be boring. It's supposed to be boring.
It's supposed to be boring,
and
right?
Trump makes it not. Trump single-handedly is the reason why we're talking about this election at all. If he wasn't in the election, we probably wouldn't be doing this because it's boring when he's not in it. If you've got Biden versus,
if this race is like Chris Christie versus Gavin Newsom,
exactly.
Are we talking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No one's paying attention, and then the people who are voting either because they actually have some issue on the line, or they're at the very least they're following, or maybe they're in a group, maybe they're in a union that someone mentioned their union and they, oh yeah, I like that, and most people aren't really paying that much attention, and so the get out the vote effort is way lower, and yes, less people vote. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not saying that less people are able to vote. It's just that less people care enough to get up and go vote. That's not necessarily a bad thing because that gets people who don't really care or who aren't paying attention or who just aren't interested, if they don't vote, that's kind of a good thing because that way a larger percentage of the votes are coming from people who actually know what they're talking about. They're actually voting for a reason. Now you've got pretty much everyone is voting, like everyone is at least saying that they're voting. They're at least putting in some input.
The funniest meme is the one, it's like the old white guy whose face is like, it's like my face when every 4 years I wait for the dumbest 20,000 Pennsylvanians to decide the election,
it is that. That's the case for sure.
But I still think entertainment politics is probably one of the root issues.
I think so too.
Right now.
And that's Trump. I mean, you can't say Kamala is the one who's getting everyone to vote. That's Trump.
If you say it's a root issue, right? And I think if we really zoom out a little bit, right? Who are we? We are some suburban white males from the Chicago suburbs here, middle class after 2008. All right, we probably became just dead middle class. Parents all work 9-to-5 jobs their whole lives, right? We're starting to get more into our careers in our lives. We're starting to have trying to work on our savings a little bit more, right? And then just as the future goes forward, every voting cycle after this, are we going to expect that entertainment politics, is going to be lesser or more? Because it's
I can't imagine it getting more. I hope not.
I don't think you can. Once the cat's out of the bag, you say this a lot. No, once the genie's out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in.
Yeah. I don't know.
The attention economy, the fact that if you could hold
Trump is already making TikToks, right? So where do we go from here?
Yeah, Kamala HQ literally just posts memes all day about things it's ridiculous. That is not what politics is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. It's a dog and pony show now. Who is talking about the issues?
No, yeah, that's what it is, and that's definitely a good description of the problem because the issues go over everyone's heads now. No one cares anymore, and so it's who knows what they're actually doing? You know, like that's the questions aren't even about the issues. The questions in the political debates are not about the issues. They're very vaguely about the issues, but then the answers just go right over them.
Well, I think the questions try to be about the issues, and then both candidates they'll say like one line, like, oh, how do you feel about like our support for Israel? Like, I think we need to support all of our allies. However, Donald Trump in the last round of elections,
what's the deal with immigration? I grew up in a middle-class family, and Donald Trump has just been a fascist. And all right, thanks for that.
All right, Mr. Trump, what would you do about like foreign wars? Well, the real issue with foreign wars is the southern border.
Once we figure out how we're gonna get the Biden administration to stop transing the illegal immigrants in prison, then we'll worry about the foreign wars. It's like, all right, that was like one guy or something. But yeah, right. None of the real issues matter. It's all the hot button, like what's popular now, and even that. I haven't yet to hear like a good sophisticated idea on either side in any public forum at all. You know,
the only good one I've heard the entire time is Kamala's small business tax break. That's like the only piece of policy I've heard from either side that kind of like sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specifics of that one. I know Kamala's talking about...
And that's the problem. I don't know the specifics of it. Yeah. Is that even a real idea? Is that just something she's throwing out? Here's another one she says. Lowering taxes for middle-class families. Sounds great.
Right,
How are you going to do it?
It's more to it than that, right. Same with Trump does the same thing where he'll say, Trump's saying, oh yeah, we're just going to get rid of all income tax.
Right.
So obviously no one's going to be like, oh no, I don't want that. Everyone wants that. But it's, like you said, the majority of people are uninformed and uneducated when it comes to politics, and so they hear free candy, and it's like do you remember this? You probably remember this too. Back in the old elementary school days, there was someone who was like running for school president. I can't remember his name. I shouldn't say his name anyway, but there was a bunch of people who went up there and they were running for like school president, and they said a bunch of stuff. And it was like, we're going to try to do it was all boring stuff. And then this one guy comes up there and he's like electric, and he's like, yeah, we're going to get a field trip to Disney World next year. We're going to go to the water parks once a week. He started saying all this nonsense he couldn't do. He won in a landslide. Do you guys remember this or no? We were in maybe 5th grade or something.
But free candy for everyone if you vote.
Free candy was one of the...
vote for me.
Right.
That kind of sounds like, register to vote to protect the Second Amendment, and you can win $1 million.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you on that. I don't think that's right either. I was not a fan of that. Elon Musk is one of my favorite people. He's like one of my idols, one of my favorite people. Don't like that, really. I think that's, look, if it was the other side, if George Soros was on there doing that for Kamala, I would say, yeah, that's not all right. So I agree with that one. I don't know if, we talked about how might be illegal, might not be. Not a big fan of that.
I don't think it's illegal. I think someone would have found it by now. There's people working around the clock to try and kill that, I'm sure. And if they haven't found it yet, I'm sure me and you doing 10 minutes on Google aren't going to find it.
Yeah, right. No, I mean, it's a bad precedent to set. I think that's what it comes down to, too, is the reason that a lot of the shit that's going on right now is really, really bad. Look, Trump's pretty old. He's not going to last forever. Eventually, it will hopefully go back to, if we don't go into a civil war here soon, but eventually, say Trump's gone, eventually goes back to normal, standard, boring politics. But the problem is that as part of United States law, a lot of these issues are set on precedent. And I think that's one of the main problems with Trump too, is he's such a divisive character that all logic and all kind of, rigid structures go out the window, because it's like, we got to get this guy, we got to get him out, or we got to get him in, depending what side you are. And so all the rules kind of go out the window. And because U.S. law is set on precedent, we're now setting all of these really bad precedents that won't go away. So like jailing your political opponent, that is really bad, because you know what that means? If Trump wins, he now can do that because it's a precedent now. We jail our political opponents now. Now, when does that ever end? And it's going to be the same thing with a lot of that stuff. Giving away the $1 million for registered voters in Pennsylvania, that's ridiculous, because now I bet all 50 states next year, someone's going to be or next election, someone's going to be offering to hand out $1 million if you register to vote in the state. Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's a bad precedent, and it doesn't matter what side's good, what side's bad. Everything that goes down, you got to keep in mind, would you still support this if your other side was doing it against you?
Right.
And that's what I think is losing it, because both sides are doing terrible, terrible things.
Speaking of precedent, one thing that I'm very opposed to, gets thrown around a lot in left-leaning circles, is stacking the Supreme Court. I think that is a
Good example.
god-awful idea.
Great example.
Because, you know, all
terrible
right, it's
precedent.
what, like 5-2 or 4-3 right now on the Supreme Court?
Fact check.
Yeah, I
I
can't
don't
remember
know.
exactly. but-
Either way, it's a right-leaning court, right? You know, the left's always talking about, oh, we gotta stack the court, you know, like, it's not illegal to do so. All right, so you win this time around, you stack the court. What's gonna happen next time around? If the right wins, they're gonna stack the court, and then you're gonna stack the court again, right? Like, the domino effect on some of these things could be catastrophic.
Right, yeah, it's when you start trying to change the rules to benefit you in a situational condition rather than to, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, if you're playing a football game and you're on the 20-yard line, you know, it's like you could start suggesting a rule that it's like, oh, if you're on the 20-yard line, then that means you already scored. Or, you know, it's like stuff like that where it's like they're trying to move the goalposts where, yeah, it might, the people who are in support of it, like, yes, it might help you now, but then once it's in the other guy's hands, you're screwed, you know? Like, you don't want to, you know, you don't want to set those
It's 6-3, by the way.
6-3?
6-3,
Yeah,
okay,
6-3.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's pretty aggressive.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg fucked that up for sure.
Did you know, and I fact-checked this too, because it didn't sound right, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was actually in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade.
Really?
Which doesn't sound right, but apparently she was. It wasn't because she was anti-abortion or anything. She just did think it was a state's issue.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a weird one, but yeah, apparently she was.
I mean, you'd think she'd be pretty far left there.
That's what I would have thought.
Right.
What do you think about the Electoral College? This is a good one too, and I think this is a good informational one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a good back and forth here. Not a very hostile one, you know. As far as popular vote, would you rather have a popular vote over than the Electoral College?
Probably.
So, all right, this is one where I think it fits what we just said, where it's like, yes, okay, currently the left wins the popular vote all the time, and the Republicans only get in office because of the Electoral College. So it seems like, yeah, DEI for Republicans, like you said. I would argue that is not the case at all, and that it's if it weren't for the Electoral College, the current Democratic platform and the current Republican platform would be entirely different, because the Electoral College is what it's not that the Republicans designed their platform in order to make it so that there's an Electoral College so they can win. Their platform is designed on the fact that there is a Electoral College. So the Electoral College is the cause, not the effect. You know what I mean? It's not like Republicans are the ones that said, oh, they're the ones saying, oh, we need the Electoral College because that's how we win. It's because the Electoral College is in there, so that's why we come up with our policies.
Well, explain how the Electoral College isn't DEI for urban-rural areas.
Because, okay, so for one, it's because it's not even
Sorry,
about
rural, not urban. That's a contradictory statement.
it's not even in support of those people. Well, yes, it is in support of those people, but what it's really about, it's about incentivizing politicians to account for everyone.
To include everyone. Equitably. In a diversity of opinions.
Yes, exactly.
DEI,
yes.
that's DEI.
Okay, okay, but there's a difference between DEI in a governance and a DEI in a capital. Look, if you're running businesses, that's a whole different landscape. Look, when it comes to, like, you know, socialism or an equitable thing, that's how the system's designed, is that everyone gets one vote. That's why you don't vote with your dollar. That's a good thing when it comes to elections. When it comes to everyone getting represented, everyone should get a vote. But when it comes to a business, should everyone be the CEO of the business? No.
All right, we're not talking about DEI in business right now. I'm saying DEI in the Electoral College. Explain to me how it isn't DEI.
Okay, in this case, I'll give it to you. It is DEI in the Electoral.
So you're in favor of DEI? Gotcha question. Sorry.
No, it's not. It's not even a gotcha. It's not even a gotcha because it fundamentally just doesn't acknowledge anything that I'm saying. I'm in favor of DEI when it comes to should everyone get a vote? Should every single citizen of the United States get a vote? Yes. That's. I'm in favor of it in that sense.
Popular vote works that way as well.
Right. Now, I'm not in favor of DEI when it comes to, should everyone in the United States be hired for the position that they choose, specifically based on their ethnicity or their gender or whatever. That's a whole different story. So that's how it's not DEI, because it's, for one, it doesn't even fit into the same landscape, and for two, it has nothing to do with race, ethnicity, or gender at all. It's everyone gets one vote as the place was designed. Now, your point being is that, okay, because we have an electoral college, we live in a heavy blue state, so our vote doesn't matter. If we didn't have an electoral college and you lived in Wyoming, your vote wouldn't matter.
Wouldn't it matter equally as everyone else's?
If we didn't have an electoral college, no, because it would count as one vote, right? But the politicians would have no incentive to represent you as someone who lives in a rural area. So your voice would not get heard. So if there's a popular vote, it's mob rule. Basically, the top 5, top 10 cities would decide policy, and the politicians would have no incentive to account for anyone else in the country. The reason the electoral college is good is because, yes, everyone campaigns in the swing states because they already have their other states locked down, but Trump can't go up and say something along the lines of that's going to really hurt someone in Wyoming.
There's a large portion of Republican voters living in big cities, such as yourself, who will never be, included in these sort of deals, right? I actually heard someone saying the popular vote might actually help Republicans because Republicans might start showing out more in states with big cities because their vote actually matters now, as opposed to now, what's the point of voting now if you're a Republican living in Illinois?
They're heavily misunderstanding the Electoral College. There would be no Republicans and Democrats if it weren't for the Electoral College, because the reason Republicans and Democrats have the stances that they do is because of the Electoral College. If you get rid of the Electoral College, we would no longer be debating the issues that we currently are. Imagine they got rid of the Electoral College back in 1920 instead of 2024. They got rid of it in 1924. Do you think that we would be sitting here debating about immigration? We wouldn't be debating about any of that. They'd be entirely different issues, and both sides would take issues and they'd be fighting to see who would benefit the larger populated areas more. The underpopulated areas would receive no representation. They would have no politicians in their favor.
I think if we could change, go away from the two-party system, if we had, a multitude of parties, then I think the popular vote would work even better, because then you have people, if you ranked choice voting, say, and
is that Europe or Germany? Who does that?
Germany's in Europe.
But just
many European countries do this.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So, all right, if 17% of people vote for this candidate, they receive 17% of those legislative seats in, whatever their legislative branch is, right? So now, if we had that along with the popular vote, which is how Europe does it, it's a popular vote, everyone's vote equals one vote. You get the percentage, whatever percentage of votes go to your candidate, that's how many seats you get. If we had that, wouldn't then many political parties form to try and court to urban or rural voters?
I'm a fan of that.
That sounds good, but that would be more for Congress, I'm picturing, right? Or no?
Yeah,
rather than for the president.
That's for Congress, yeah.
Yeah, I mean no, trust me, I'm not a fan of the two-party system at all.
But then it's whoever receives the highest percentage gets the executive branch as well.
Okay. Yeah, see, I'm not fully against that. So you don't really have to get a majority in that case. You just have to get a plurality.
You need a plurality, yeah.
Right, and I think it not used to. I could be botching this. You might need a fact check on this. I think at one point it was that in the United States, way back before the Civil War, when we first started, that you only had to get a plurality. I could be botching that. I thought I remember hearing that. Either way, I think that's not
is that wig too tight or?
Huh?
Is that wig too tight?
Too tight. It might have been. I don't know. I could be botching that, but no. I'm not a fan of the two-party system at all, but if we do have the two-party system, the Electoral College is necessary. You can't have popular vote, because then you've got two parties. Look, cities is one thing, cities versus rural, but what about if you were to take race? There's a large majority of people who are white versus a minority of people who are different ethnicities. Now, because of the Electoral College, politicians are required to account and try to they have to try to account to everyone's needs, versus having a mob rule where as long as we can get every single white person to vote for us, then we'll win. Now you've got the problem where you have two parties that are incentivized to only care about the white vote and dismiss all other ethnicities, and it's just you're just pushing people out and giving them no representation.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably counter again with someone would court those voters who are being
they would lose.
Who are being marginalized.
But they would lose. And if they would lose, then and if they would lose once, then they'll lose the next time, then they'll lose the next time, and then eventually the only way to win is to stop doing that. And so then one party would keep whatever the party was that wasn't doing that would keep losing. And so the other party would stay in power. The only way for them to win would be to take the other approach.
I see where you're going with that. I don't know if it would like devolve that quickly into.
Probably not quickly. No,
Like,
I don't think quickly. But if it were to happen 100 years ago, by now we'd be in a state where anyone who lives in rural areas, which we need those people, you know, they make the food. You know,
Right.
we need those people. They would have no vote.
I saw one interesting take on that. It's like, oh, like it's not red versus blue. It's food producers versus food consumers. I thought about it like that. Like,
Yeah.
pretty good point.
I mean, even take food out of it, just producers versus consumers.
Well,
cities
cities produce a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Cities.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're talking about if you were to look at the electoral map, it's like the states.
No, I'm just saying, like you look at like GDP, like Chicago has a way bigger GDP than like Aurora.
Yeah. True. Yeah. True.
I don't know.
No, that's a good point. I gotta take this Trump wig off because I'm getting too heated here. I gotta
That's
go.
a Trump wig? I thought that was a billionaire wig.
Whatever it is. I'm going Caesar now. So I saw this thing. I don't know if this is right or not. Never bothered to fact check it, but it was just kind of it was a while ago too. I might have mentioned it to you before. I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast, but it was like, all right, if you look at throughout history, the biggest populist leaders, like the most charismatic populist leaders, you would get Caesar, Napoleon, and then it was like a pro-Trump page, so they were putting Trump on there. but they were saying so Caesar came to power. He was then exiled from power, came back, assembled like a team of supporters, came back, took back power, and then was killed. Napoleon came to power, was then exiled from power, took some time off, assembled a big team of his supporters, came back, took power back again, and then was killed. And Trump came to power, was then exiled from power, took some time off, gathered up his team of supporters, and is now marching back in. And the prediction was like he's going to win the election and then get killed.
Napoleon wasn't killed; he was exiled again.
Oh, was he just exiled? Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, no, they stuck him back on the. That story is awesome. I don't know if you're familiar with that story. But
yeah. You give me the details here.
So they exile him the first time. They sentence him to death. They give him hemlock, which is the poison that Socrates drank. So they pour up some hemlock in his cup, and he says, "Do you know who I am? I'm Napoleon. It's going to take more hemlock than that to kill me." So he keeps pouring more, and he's like, "Do you know who I am? Like I am the great general." He's like, "It's going to take more hemlock than that to kill me." He has like a full cup, drinks it all in one go, immediately throws it up. And so he didn't have time to digest it. So the poison didn't kill him. He goes, "I told you it was going to take more than that to kill me." After that, he sails back to France. He lands on the beachhead. A whole army is there and said like, "Hey dude, you're exiled. You got kicked out." Napoleon has like 20 guys behind him facing an entire army. He stands in front of them and goes, "Do you remember me? Like, do you remember like what we did together? Like how many of you have forgotten already?" Everyone immediately joins his side. They march on the Capitol. Napoleon takes power back. Like you talk about charismatic populist leaders. Like,
yeah, that's a badass
you start there.
Yeah, no, that's what I've seen a lot of videos on Napoleon. He seems like a kind of a beast. Where you were telling me that he actually wasn't even short. They were just making that up.
No, so have you heard this? He's supposedly 5'2", but back then they had 13 inches in a foot. So he was actually 5'7", which was like slightly above average height for a Frenchman at the time.
They've just been depicting him as like a short little man ever since.
Dude, it's because everyone fucking hated him if you weren't French. Literally, like the entire Europe and like Russia, the entire like Eurasian continent teamed up against him, and he like kicked their ass for like a decade.
Yeah, no, he was the one that was really just basically dominating all of Europe for a while.
He was. Right? Let's get back onto the election.
All right.
Yeah, we're how many days out is it, right?
12 or something?
Well, by the time if we're releasing this on Halloween special, we'll be 5 days out.
Be 5 days out?
5 days out,
Should we get into predictions?
Yeah,
we can do some predictions.
You guys, I think you should get into your predictions as well as maybe like what you would do if you were in office at this time, right? Because everything's out of our control at this point. Like we got our votes, we're going to throw them away. I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys would do if you were placed in office at this time, with things going on in Palestine and Israel and Ukraine and Russia.
I can start this one off.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would do the greatest deal in American history since the Louisiana Purchase. I would go to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan,
Buy it all up.
Saudi Arabia, and I'd say, you know what? The reason we support Israel is to support our economic interests in the area.
Yeah.
If we just teamed up with all the people that we actually need the resources from, and we ditch this parasitic, entity that we place there on purpose, we create the problem, and then we sell the solution.
That sounds like exactly what Trump was doing in 2019. Was basically not he wasn't going against Israel, but he was basically
No one's going against Israel in our political system.
No, he wasn't going against
We are
Israel,
very
but
team
he,
Israel.
but he was forming an alliance in the Middle East. Israel was part of it, but Iran was the main problem, but it was the Abraham Accords, and they had like a couple people on board, a couple of the countries on board, a couple more were in the process of signing, and then when it switched, it kind of went to shit.
When it what?
When Trump was out, Biden was in, or actually it was probably before. It was when like COVID hit. It kind of just like went. It didn't play out, but that
Russia,
sounds like what he was trying to
Ukraine,
do too.
I don't really know. I think we manufactured that one as well. I'm pretty sure we like blew up the Nord Stream pipeline or some shit to like go to Russia into invading Ukraine. I think we started that one as well.
You think so?
I'm
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah, I remember looking at something like that. I don't know about
Putin's
that.
kind of he's a little sussed out by Western culture. So Ukraine being there, he's kind of getting scared. He's a little.
Yeah, that is pretty much that's a pretty good summary.
He sees what's
of
going
these.
on in the U.S. and he's like, man, if that starts going on in Ukraine and they start getting on, a little closer, he's a little sussed out. It's like illegal to have a painting of him dressed in like makeup, that kind of stuff. It's just he's
Putin?
He's a very sensitive guy.
He's a very sensitive guy. Putin.
You have any ideas on that?
On the Ukraine?
Ukraine or Israel, Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, so Ukraine, I can go on. So the thing about Ukraine is basically Ukraine used to be part of the USSR, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And so
At least part of it was for sure.
Yeah, part of it was. All the lines get redrawn.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that so we've got NATO and the USSR collapsed, and so it used to be kind of NATO versus the USSR. That all kind of fell apart. So now Russia feels as if we are aggressing towards them. We've signed multiple deals over the past 25 years saying that we will not expand NATO. That was originally why the Cold War, they say it ended, and I would argue that it might still be going on, but they say it ended because we agreed to these deals where we won't keep expanding NATO. We won't keep expanding NATO, yet every single president comes in and continues to expand NATO. And so after doing that for 25 years, Putin basically looked at Ukraine. Ukraine's trying to get into NATO, and he's like, all right, that's right on our border now. It used to be we had like quite a big buffer zone. We are now, one state away from NATO being right on our border. Not going to happen. Jumps in and takes over Ukraine. I don't think that it's like Putin bad guy or Ukraine bad guy. I think it's a tale as old as time when it comes to just controlling geopolitics. It's a game of risk at the end of the day, and everyone tries to make these deals. Putin sees what from his perspective, is an aggressive force coming his way and decides to say that enough is enough. And Ukraine just happened to be in the middle of it, and so that's an issue. But I do think that war is probably solvable if a deal were to come to the table. Like if Trump were to get in, or maybe Kamala too, I don't know. But if someone were to come in and give a reasonable deal to both sides.
What's the reasonable deal to both sides, though?
I think the reasonable deal would be Putin gets to keep the areas that he annexed in 2014, which was, I believe, Crimea.
Yeah.
If you could just restart to the times before that they invaded.
So we'll just appease him.
No, you got to go back to the times before they invaded. Mm-hmm. Have the same kind of territorial lines as were then. And then we can make a deal that it's not appeasing. It's making a win-win deal for both sides. It's not about saying, oh, we have to punish you now because you did something bad. It's about saying, hey, we're going to give you something that you'll like, so you stop doing bad things.
I don't think you can't give strong men.
You have to.
You can't give strong men war of aggression territory. You
territory, I agree. If they come in and invade, you can't just let them have it. I agree on that, but I do agree. There's much more than territory. There's resources. There's deals. All these countries are working exclusive deals where, part of the reason the dollar is so valuable, despite not being backed by gold, is because it's kind of backed by oil. because we have to
It's
deal
the
with the petrodollar,
yeah.
right? And it's like deals like that, that
Yeah.
that's what keeps peace when it comes to violence, when it comes to territorial advances. Peace is kept. Look, the globe is not peaceful. We are not all peaceful. Even prior to the war starting, there was no major wars, but that didn't mean that we were in like a peaceful harmony. It meant that we were warring over the pen and paper. We were warring over who's got the deal with who. Who's got access to these resources, who doesn't. Those were the wars being fought. I think we go back to fighting those wars, we stop killing civilians.
There's wars going on right now that are just like information wars.
Yes, information wars, cyber wars.
Misinformation wars, cyber warfare, right? Richie sent me a podcast. What was the podcast about the Civil War may have already
Culture
started?
Wars, Tim Pool. Great podcast. They got a lot of good topics.
Tim Pool, right. There's this guy saying, like, basically, a civil war may have already started. It just hasn't turned hot yet, right? It's just, right. It's just like the pre-staging. You don't know when you're about to start a war. Like, you can never look at something and say, oh, this is going to start a war a year from now, right? Like, that's kind of the main idea behind it, is you don't know when it's gonna pop up. There's always like things underneath the scenes that bubble up to a boiling point, wherein I think one of the main theories presented was until war becomes the most viable solution for both sides.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Yeah, when game theory says, from my perspective, I am safer going to war with you than I am remaining peaceful with you, and that same perspective persists on both sides, that's when hot wars break out. But the cold wars that come before it are kind of the period we're going through now, which I guess your question was, what is our prediction? Would you predict that a civil war may break out? A hot war?
No, I don't even. What would it look like? That's kind of my main question is.
I think maybe it starts off as small organizations, Antifa, the Proud Boys, that type of thing, where they're, it starts off as protests, really, but they're violent protests, not peaceful protests. And I mean, we saw it. I mean, we saw in 2020, we saw the George Floyd riots in the summer. They were firebombing the Capitol. They were burning down buildings on Michigan Avenue, all of that. And then we saw it with the January 6th thing, where you had people storming the Capitol, you had widespread protests. If you were to get both sides, imagine that crowd on January 6th versus the crowd on the George Floyd riots, and they were to come head to head. Would you consider that kind of a war? I consider that a bit of a war, and especially if you've got different police forces on both sides. Where you've got, like in Chaz. Remember Chaz? Chaz was great. I was a big fan of Chaz. You remember Chaz?
No.
Or CHOP, they called it?
No.
The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in 2020.
Oh,
remember that?
yeah,
that was great.
I
So they blocked off like a couple blocks in Seattle. They took over the police station. The police were all about it, because the police said, okay, yeah, you're right. This is for freedom. It's a far left area. And so they let these people take over this zone. Now, meanwhile, there's people who are living in the zone trying to get to work. They can't get in or out because
I remember seeing a video. It's like someone calls the cops. It's like, hey, these people are like rioting. These people are like burning down.
Now.
The cop's like, oh, that's in the unincorporated zone. Sorry, I can't help you out. That's the People's Republic of Chaz. Or
that was what they called it. The People's Republic of Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. But the thing about that was funny is it started off. It was they called it the No Cop Co-op. Cops weren't allowed in. It was it was an anti-police protest. So the cops kind of got out. They let them do their thing. But what ended up happening is after like 9 days, the cops started emerging as regular people. There was like a rapper with, I can't remember his name. I'm not gonna be able to remember his name, but he was a hilarious guy, total goofball. But so eventually he's walking around, him and his boys, they're walking around with guns. They're the only ones with guns in there. So now they're the police. And so what they say goes. Eventually it kind of fell to shit. But anyway, my point being is that if something like that were to start up, you might have parts of.
So all right. So let's say Kamala wins, right?
Okay.
Say Kamala wins. The right's pissed. Some form of, the Proud Boys, whatever new name they go by, starts doing some shit. And then say civilians on the left are like, oh, yeah, we can't allow that. And then they start attacking them, right?
With what?
Mm-hmm.
With what? Good question. That's a good one. But so they start fighting, right?
Okay.
Where then does the police come in? Where does like the military come into play? Like, what are they, like, peacekeepers?
Well, that's the thing is I don't know. It depends on how. So if military is an easier one because it's just a more direct line to the top. It depends on. I mean, we could be talking Game of Thrones type character where there is no clear president. right? So like say Trump wins, right? And this is actually, you asked for my prediction. I'd say this is, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I think it's a possibility. Trump is declared the winner based on the Electoral College vote. But Kamala uses the precedent that Trump set, which was a terrible one, which one of my biggest critiques of Trump, sets the precedent. No other president's ever done this before. But Trump comes out and tells all of his followers, hey, that the vice president has the power to not certify the election. No one's ever heard of that before.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing. It's never been a thing. Even if he did have the power, if it's never happened before, you shouldn't do it. He set that precedent. That's a perfect example of why you don't set precedents. Because now, if he wins this election, who gets to certify the vote? Kamala Harris.
This is what I was going to bring up. Either
he doesn't
way,
certify. Now all of a sudden, no one knows who the president is, and now
that's anarchy.
Is the military going to listen to what Kamala says or what Trump says? Who's the commander in chief? I don't know. Trump won the election. Kamala says he's not president, and she's the one who, according to Trump, can certify the vote. What's going on? Anarchy. So that's a danger I think we have.
It seems kind of far-fetched. However, in just the span of like 6, 12, 24, 48 hours, I could actually see that being a pretty realistic thing that could happen. It's similar to like when everybody stormed the Capitol. The way it happened and how fast it happened and the general public's reaction to the election news, I feel like is delayed to what's actually happening, right? So like, I could see that being a very realistic possibility that these messages kind of get sent out and the general public is confused and they don't know what the clear answer is, you know what I mean? And how like crazy the media is going to go. It could just be almost like a purge, to be honest. And
you've got 4 months. You got November, December. Well, not 4 months. 2.5 months, kind of. Yeah, November,
November 4th?
2 months. November
December,
to January.
You guys want to like hit the hills or something? Man, I'm getting kind of nervous.
Yeah, well, I already got Megan. Me and Megan already got a plan. We can't tell you the plan because then you'll steal it. Yeah. But if shit goes down, we have a plan. We're gonna get the hell out of here.
Yeah, no. I was gonna bring this up. Either way, whoever wins, it's gonna be an interesting one because Kamala is supposed to certify it either way. That used to be just like ceremonial. Right,
it's ceremonial.
Like
yes.
Before Trump set that precedent of, well, technically Mike Pence doesn't have to certify this election result because it was stolen from me, right? Either way, Kamala is either, say she wins the Electoral College, she's either saying, yep, this election was free and fair, I'm in, or she's saying she has to, then if Trump were to win the Electoral College, she either has to make the decision of, all right, I have to sign my opponent into office, or I have to like not sign him in. But you brought up a good point.
This might be the point. But the problem here now that I'm seeing is that you've got, it's one thing when some jackass on Twitter says Trump's a fascist. When you've got the sitting vice president and running candidate going on a mainstream publication like CNN or MSNBC saying that Trump is a literal fascist. Okay, if he was actually a fascist, she shouldn't certify him.
Right.
So by her own standards, what she's saying is that he's a fascist. If he were to win the election, I would be obligated not to certify him. Is how, at least that might not be what she intends to say, but that's how people can read into it.
You said that to me the other day, and it took me a while to think about that, right? I'm like, if you are going around saying this guy's going to turn the military against American citizens, this guy's going to put, immigrants into internment camps, this guy's going to, try and never have a free and fair election again, you probably shouldn't swear him in, right?
And if you get 50% of the country saying, "Oh, we shouldn't swear him in," you've destroyed the election.
So then, what you said, it's either one of two things. It's either one, you firmly believe that he is a fascist dictator wannabe, and you shouldn't sign him in, or two, you're gonna sign him in, and you admit that it was all political theater.
It was all, right. And so, I mean, hopefully it's the second one. If he wins, hopefully she goes the second round. If she doesn't certify,
I can't see her not certifying. We've talked about this. You think it's a real possibility?
I think
really
it is
don't.
Just because I think that what is a politician? Politicians are, in theory, supposed to be subservient to their voters. I think that we have reached a boiling point where maybe she does certify. I think it's more likely that she does certify him than it is that she doesn't. But I think she will face the same pressure that Pence faced from the right to certify Trump. Now, Pence did the right thing by not doing it.
Mike Pence, don't love the guy.
He did the right thing.
That was one of the most courageous acts I've seen in politics.
He did the right thing, and our systems held. Our systems held up, and that's what I mean. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, it was a big insurrection." I think it was definitely overplayed in the media, because why wouldn't they? They've been trying to overplay every bad thing.
I think if they had found senators, they would have probably fucking either beat the shit out of them or killed them.
Depending on who it was. If it was like Pelosi, if they found Pelosi, they might have roughed her up. They might have roughed her up. Yeah.
They were chanting "Hang Mike Pence."
I agree. But you got to keep in mind too. That was a couple hundred people. That is the far radical right extreme.
Yeah.
Whereas that's the same thing as Antifa, who's going in and beating up some guy who ran a sandwich shop, who tweeted something good about Trump, or some of those stories for the George Floyd thing. So there's radicals on both sides. I'm not in any way saying that I think that the January 6th people who went into the Capitol and started doing all that shit were good. I will ask you this question. This is an interesting question. As someone on the left, after the January 6th thing happened, the next day or 2 days, or while it was happening even, how did you feel?
I was pretty terrified.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't believe you, but I'm not believing that all of the left was terrified on this, because I was someone who was on the right, and I was also feeling pretty pissed off, because I was like, God, my thought process was, fuck, the left is going to destroy us with this. And I know for a fact that there was people on the left saying, yes, we got them good. We can destroy them with this.
I wasn't scared for our democracy.
What were you terrified of?
I was scared of the fact that, how is it fucking possible that 300 fucking people can take our capital?
That's the weird part, is that none of them, there was not even really much of a fight. I mean, it was people are just walking in.
They just walked right in. How is this is supposed to be one of our most secure buildings in the entire world? How is it that, again, a precedent, any time now that any election goes the wrong way, either side can pull up to the halls of power and be like, yeah, that's not very cool. We're gonna walk in and try and change this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, my point being is that we've reached such a thing where it's such a fake world where, when I saw the January 6th thing, I was thinking, fuck, this is bad.
January 6th thing?
The January 6th thing. The small thing happened.
The small get-together.
Yeah, the little thing happened. But when I saw that, I was thinking, fuck, this is bad, because this is going to hurt, this is going to kill Trump. This is terrible. This is bad press, bad. Okay. When I saw the George Floyd thing, I remember thinking...
Thing? You're using this word thing. I think you could probably pick a better word, I feel. Maybe.
When I saw...
It's coming off a little biased, okay? It's just
he used thing for both sides.
When I saw...
He used thing for January 6th. He used thing for George Floyd, though.
When I saw the January 6th gathering, and when I saw the George Floyd violent insurrection... But you know what I mean?
Right.
As someone who's on the right, I'm thinking, all of these protests from the left, this is good for the right. And as someone who's on the left, I imagine most people are probably thinking, January 6th, that's good for the left. So when the right wilds out and the left wilds out, it's good for the other side when it's for media. What does that do? That incentivizes media to try to continue to pour fuel on the fire to get people to keep wilding out, so they can say, look at them, they're bad. You know what I mean? And it kind of goes the same way, I think, with Israel-Palestine, where you've got two sides doing that same kind of thing, where you're fighting a media propaganda battle as well as an on-the-ground battle.
Yeah, and that's one of the big issues. I mean, we say every time we think of something, we say this is one of the most pressing issues. But one of the most pressing issues is the fact that the media turns us on each other, right? And that's kind of the whole point of the media at this point. It's not to inform us; it's to enrage us and to keep us locked in and scared, right?
Yep.
There's no money to be made in saying let's just talk things out calmly. It's fire everyone up, get everyone pissed off, get them attacking the other side. That's how you draw attention to yourself.
Yeah, that's 100% right. It's all, it's. I think we might have talked about this before, but where when it comes to the Roman circus, the idea of the Roman circus, shit's going bad, the leaders are screwing shit up. Well, let's just distract the people. Let's just distract them. We'll bring in the circus, right? Mm-hmm. But where we're at is there's a Roman circus going on
every day,
yeah. And the terrifying part is that it's almost as if we're watching. It was kind of what we were talking about earlier. When Trump got in, everyone started paying attention. It's now entertainment, but it's almost as if we're watching. And I also used Game of Thrones earlier to describe what's going on. It's almost as if we're watching Game of Thrones go on in the real world, and everyone kind of has a side. It's like watching a baseball game.
Everyone's picking their house.
Everyone's got a football game.
Yeah.
We got a football game on. I'm a Bears fan. You're a Packers fan, and we're watching it. And it's like, and that's kind of what it is. But it's the real world, and it's become entertainment because of that exact reason. I think the media is now incentivized to fan the flames and get everyone going. But
I'll go into my prediction. My prediction: this one's a coin flip. I don't think you can call it either way at this point. Most polls have it right down the freaking middle. If you go on overseas betting sites, they have Trump favored at like minus 150 right now. I think he's surged a little bit. Maybe not surged. He's pulled ahead slightly in some key swing states, right? He has to win Pennsylvania, essentially. He has to win, I believe it's one of Wisconsin or Michigan. Then he has to win, I think, 2 out of 3 of Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. I think that's close to the breakdown.
Okay.
He's ahead right now in I think most of those right now. I think that's probably why the betting line is moving towards him. It's a coin flip though. Like basically, I think it's if you win Pennsylvania, you're going to win the presidency.
Yeah, it comes down to Pennsylvania.
In this one, I think Harris is going to win it. I'm not confident at all. And, that's kind of the whole joke. It's like the left is, I think Harris is going to win, but I'm super, super scared, and I'm not sure at all. I'm pretty anxious about it. And the right now is saying, oh, Trump's going to win. This is going to be a fucking blowout.
Yeah,
right.
that definitely seems to be the case. All right, do you think that the gambling markets are a better indicator of the winner, or do you think that the polls are a better winner?
Yeah, so the polls are very flawed, right? In 2016, I think they predicted a Hillary sweep.
Yeah, I think Trump had 25% chance or something.
Yeah, so the polls can obviously be inaccurate. I think 8 years ago, back 2016, Republicans were very underrepresented in polls, and that was part of the reason why Trump came in and shocked the world, right? Because people literally, no one saw it coming. I think there's an intrinsic flaw in polling data. One of them being anyone under 30 years old, we cannot be reached by conventional means. If you get a text saying, Harris Walls wants to know, are you responding to that, Nick?
I'll respond every once in a while, but I'm an outlier. I'm an outlier.
Tim Walls did email me 3 times in a row, and I responded, don't fucking email me, Tim.
Yeah, I responded the same thing.
So
yeah,
I hope he got the message there.
He's getting a lot of backlash, that guy. Kind of feel a little bit bad for Tim Walls. Tim Walls is getting bodied in the media, too.
But, so, age 18 to 30, I don't know if any of that market is represented in the polls. Now, whether that's heavily left-leaning, heavily right-leaning, I don't really know.
That's a good question, too.
I would say women in that demographic have to be more left-leaning just in terms of, reproductive rights right now.
Yeah.
On the other hand, young men are turning more and more
Which is
right.
insane. I mean, that's the first time in the last at least 100 years. I mean, I'm sure maybe, I don't know back in the day, but since World War II, this might be the first time ever where a Republican is going to get a large percentage of the young under 30 male vote, where normally it's the old people's vote is going to the Republican. The young under 30 male vote is usually going, at least 50% Democrat, if not more. It seems like this year they might have a good
There's
bump,
there's the old saying, if you're young and not a Democrat, you're heartless. If you're old and not a Republican, you're stupid.
Right, yeah, you're mindless or whatever. Yeah, I've seen that one too. And I think that holds a little bit of a weight. It also comes down to the fact that a lot of people everyone talks, I don't think I've ever brought this up to you, but it's a good point. When it comes down to the systematic distribution of wealth, right? We're always talking about, some people are rich and some people are poor. So it's everyone's looking at racial lines or gender do you know what the number one indicator of, based on your demographic, based on your immutable characteristics? It's age. Yeah. The number one indicator of how wealthy you are is your age. So if you are 60 years old, I have a good chance of guessing about how much money you have. Versus if you're 20 years old, I have a good chance of guessing about how much money you have. And it does make sense because, when you look at the old people, they have a lot of money in the stock market. They have a lot of money in all of these assets where they want those to go up, versus someone who's younger has a lot of, they're working on incomes, they've got cash. They want to have more purchasing power with the cash that they have. I think that makes a lot of sense. But it is really weird that a lot of the young people are voting for the right, which might not align with their interests, honestly. But
yeah, and maybe this is a debate for another time. Like, why are young men starting to move right? You know, I don't know if this is exactly the conversation for this debate because we're going into election purposes. That's an interesting one, though.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that the right is the new rebellion? Like, for example, like Rage Against the Machine, right? The band. Rage Against the Machine, I think, is a good example of in the, late 80s, 90s, the youth, teens, 20-year-olds are raging against the machine in the sense where they're anti-establishment. That's always been that way. It was the way in the hippies.
Right.
They were the rebellion and was always on the left. And it almost seems now is the left, and I think you've brought this up before, the left is our old teachers saying, hey, quiet in the hallways, hey, put your mask on, hey, this and that. And the right is the one saying, like,
who gives a shit?
Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
I feel like that. I feel like the tables have turned on when the more rebellious people are on the right now, where they used to be on the left.
I saw, this might have been a couple of years ago now, and I don't know who it was. It was some Republican, probably senator, congressman. They were trying to like reclaim counterculture, right? Saying it like counterculture, essentially, right? So, all right, if everyone is part of counterculture, then that's just the culture. So how do you go against the culture? You have to go counterculture, kind of like you got to move back into like traditional family values, right? It's like, oh, everyone now, it's like, oh, don't get married, don't have kids, don't do what they want, right? But if everyone's thinking that, the way to rebel is to have a family, to settle down.
Go to church.
Go to church.
Tim Dillon had a great one on this. He was on Rogan. Oh, one of my favorite, but he's like, all the kids are rebelling now is they're joining like Christian groups and they're, and they're starting a family where it's like, oh, what are you doing? You're dyeing your hair pink, getting a nose ring? What are you running for Congress? If you want to be a rebel, you gotta just, it's like it's all in reverse now, but it is fairly true, I think.
Yeah, interesting and kind of cool in theory. I don't know if you can ever get like true counterculture people to like get back in with like established conservative values sort of deal.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting way of thinking about it too. I'll be curious to see what it goes in the future. But as far as predictions go, all right. So what do we think? I mean, I'm predicting a Trump win, at least a Trump declared win. Now, whether or not he gets certified, we already touched on, but I'm predicting a Trump win. I think that the gambling lines have a better indicator. Yeah. That's what we're on.
Yeah,
sorry, I did the weave.
We're weaving a little bit again.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was saying, polling might not be that accurate. We've seen polling be incredibly inaccurate. I also don't know how accurate these betting lines are. I believe, we were talking about this earlier, I was under the impression that the gambling lines were basically kind of how like crypto works, right? The more someone buys an asset, the more that asset goes up in value, right? If you buy Bitcoin at 10,000, in theory, it should move up slightly in value. Like maybe your $30 purchase of Bitcoin isn't moving the market, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in theory, when there's more demand, the price is going to go up on things like that. So I thought that was how these betting lines worked. It's just wherever money is going in,
I think that's what
affects the line, and then. You can say the other part about what you said. The other factors might be going into the betting lines.
Right. So that how you described it is exactly right, and it's the same thing with like betting on a football game, right?
Yeah.
But the reason the line ends up being where it is because you got to keep in mind that there are professional bettors. So, and this is something from our boy Tommy Lake. Taught me all about this. Fantastic guy. We'll get him as a guest on the pod hopefully soon. But he taught me all about this. He does this very well. But it's all about finding the where the sharp money is what he calls it, which is, and this is only in sports too, so it might be different in politics, but when you're looking at sports lines, say you've got one team minus 150, one team plus 140 say, and the goal is always to try to get it before the line moves in another direction, and the reason it moves in other directions is because of what he calls the sharp money, where you can look and you can see, okay, this team has 80% of the voters, or 80% of the bettors.
80% of the public bettors on it,
public bettors, but only 20% of the money. And this other side has only 20% of the bettors, but 80% of the money. And that means that's what he calls the sharp money, which is these are the professionals. And these guys have algorithms that they're plugging in all the stats and they're plugging in all the conditions. So say it's a baseball game, the weather is going in there. The direction of the wind is going in there.
Right.
Attendance might be going in. Like who knows what stats are going in there? But they're taking all of these stats into account. You know what they're taking far more than just anything that I can look at ESPN and say, oh, this pitcher's got this ERA, this pitcher's got this ERA. I can figure it out. These guys have these. This is what they do for a living, and so that's why the money lines are always fairly accurate depending on the situation. Is because these are the best of the best. They're the ones who are putting all their money in. Now, in politics, I'm going in under the assumption that it's the same way, where the polls are just what you see on ESPN, but the gambling lines are taking into other metrics that, you know, maybe the polls don't even take in or your normal thing is take in. But I do see what you're saying too, where it's different than sports in the fact that no matter what you bet on a team, say in football, you're not going to affect the outcome of the game. That's the difference. Where if you're betting on a football game, it doesn't matter what side you bet on, it doesn't matter how much money you bet on, you're not going to affect the outcome of the game. The outcome of the game is to the players. In the election, it's kind of different because if I bet a shit ton of money on Trump, I may actually affect whether or not Trump wins. You know?
Yeah,
and I think that's what you're going for.
Yeah, right. I'd like to see like how much actual money is going in there, right? If it's only a couple $1,000,000, right? If it's only like $10 million, just say.
That's just Elon just sticking around.
That's
yeah.
pocket change,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If it's $50 million, even total on these lines, that's pocket change to some big mover shakers, right?
I got to imagine it's billions. It's in the double B's.
Yeah.
It's
I think yesterday I saw something. This is super rough, but it might be like $2 billion or something is out there.
Even that is kind of low, honestly, compared to what I would have thought it would have been.
Yeah.
Also, it's overseas markets, right? It's not our markets. Obviously, we couldn't have that in America. You can't allow people to be betting on political outcomes in America,
yeah,
right?
Right.
It's overseas markets. How much do you trust that, right? That's
true.
That's kind of an issue.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
that's
just the globe's
their medias are all
view then of America. So maybe it's not as many Americans, but it's people outside of America.
Right. All right. So how accurate is that?
Right.
People outside of America voting on what they think we're gonna do.
I saw a stat that was like in Germany, there's like the odds of Kamala winning are like 90%. Like 90% of people think Trump has no chance of winning or something like that in Germany.
Really?
Yeah. Or it might have been the opposite. Maybe it was 90% think Trump is, but the odds were so skewed. Is the point being like their view of what's going on is way different than our view of what's going on.
And I kind of want to just jump in there. I think it's in very poor taste. I don't know if anything in politics is in good taste, but I think it's in very poor taste that Trump's going around saying right now, I can't possibly lose this thing in a free and fair election.
I agree.
I am winning by so damn much. You look at the polls, it's a literal coin flip right now.
It's a coin flip.
He's saying to his supporters, if we lose come November 4th, it's because it was stolen from us.
Right, that's bad. I'd say that's the equivalent of the fascist thing from the left. I think that's the same thing. I totally think that Trump saying that and Elon saying that and all these people saying that, no good. You can't program 50% of the country to be ready to revolt if you don't lose by telling them no. There's no way that if I lose, the only way it could be is if cheating's going on. When all of the stats show that you have a solid chance of losing legitimately.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's the same thing as on the left where they're saying, well, they're starting to provoke the rhetoric of Trump's a fascist, he's unfit for office, that type of thing. I think that's the equivalent. That's the right equivalent of the left. The right hates it when the left does that. The left hates it when the right does that. And I think both sides need to cut that shit out.
Is it dangerous rhetoric from the left, though, if they're just quoting Trump and saying, like, all right, this is what he said. These are Hitler quotes.
Yeah, but that's not what they're doing. For one, that's not what they're doing.
And it's a bit of a dishonest question, I'll admit, because like this has been going on for longer than, just when John Kelly, whenever that guy's quotes recently came out. Very, what is it, ubiquitous timing?
Yeah, very coincidental. Yeah.
2 weeks before the election, this guy decided, now's the time to do the right thing. It's an obvious ploy.
And
you can
I would
see
say
right
there's a
through
difference
it.
when John Kelly says it on The View or whatever versus when Kamala Harris says it at a press conference on MSNBC. Big difference there.
But my question is, if you are just directly quoting the guy, is that like, you should be allowed to say, I think this is very wrong. I don't think that should be counted as like dangerous rhetoric if you're quoting the other guy's rhetoric.
No, I agree on that. You should be able to quote the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And let's assume that Trump did say that. The quote, I believe, was something along the lines of, Hitler had good generals. Why don't we have generals like Hitler had? Something like that.
That's one of them. I think there are a couple other ones, but that's
the most recent
big one going around.
And that's fine. If you want to quote him saying that, that's fine. Whether he said it or not, if somebody said the headline should be John Kelly says he heard Trump say this, rather than Trump said this, therefore he's a fascist. Because for one, it takes into account it states it as factual when it's not factual. It's an account of one person with no corroborating evidence, versus like. Obviously, we already, not to go back around, but we already said he has an incentive to bring out something damning on Trump's election. So look, I'm not saying that, he's not allowed to say that Trump said that, or we should just suppress him from claiming this because he doesn't have evidence. He doesn't have evidence. That should be that should be part of the story. He says he said this. There's no evidence, nothing. It shouldn't be that his opponent, who's the current sitting vice president, is going out saying that he's a fascist. But either way, I mean, all right, to get back to it. So predictions, it obviously comes down to the swing states.
Yeah.
Right? So the swing states are, and correct me if I'm missing any, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Nevada.
I think those are the 7.
That's the 7, okay. What are we thinking?
We can go one by one. You want to start in Arizona?
Okay, I think Arizona Trump's got it.
Border state.
I think Trump's got it.
Border state, immigration's got to be one of their biggest issues. I believe Arizona went red.
Red in 2016, blue in 2020.
And blue in 2020.
Yep.
I'd probably give that one to Trump.
I think Trump's got it.
Yeah, like I said, it's biggest issue on the right, and I think we brought this up last podcast. The biggest issue for Republican voters is immigration. No, sorry.
Economy.
Second biggest. If you can just take economy off both sides, right?
So I think it was economy for both sides was number one, and then it was abortion on the left, immigration on the right, right?
Yes, okay. I believe that is what it was. So border state, I'd probably give that one to Trump. Let's move on to Georgia.
Georgia's a real tough one.
Georgia's a really tough one.
Because for one, and I'm not promoting any type of misinformation, fake news, conspiracy. I'm condemning any violence, any rioters. I'm condemning any non-evidence-based allegations that the election is rigged. But with that being said, if it were to be rigged, it would be rigged in Georgia. I don't trust Georgia's elections at all. After the past 4 elections have all taken weeks to decide, and there's been random boosts in blue. Now, I'm not saying I've had 3 of these by now, so I'm just rambling here. No evidence to support this at all, but I think Georgia goes blue. But my reasoning being is because I think it's a little shady.
Georgia's a very hard one. Deep South. Typically it had been going red, I believe, the past several. It's just now starting to flip blue, possibly, right? Okay. Atlanta's growing exponentially, right? Big cities tend to vote blue.
Yep.
That one's almost a toss-up. That one's gonna come down to how many Harris Walls votes we can scrap up, from the mail-in.
All right.
Ballot section.
I got an idea here, Nasi. You pull up your phone, go 270. Type in this 270 to win election map, and you should get this. You ever seen this? This is good. So you should get a map of all the states that are not swing states already filled in, blue or red, with the numbers,
and then we can
fill them in. So we can fill in Arizona as red. We decided on that one. Georgia, I think we hold off on because that one we leave, I think, up for grabs.
We can leave that one. If you're saying blue, we can maybe do it blue. I don't know. We can move on to our discussion on Michigan, though.
Okay.
Michigan's a tough one. Michigan, not a border state, so there's less of an issue there.
Thing about Michigan is they're Rust Belt. Same with Pennsylvania, actually. And so you've got a lot of auto workers. You got Detroit.
Auto workers, blue collar, right? Detroit.
Blue collar guys. Now that's two sides of that coin. One, you've got probably pretty anti-climate change guys, right? They're not looking to ban gas-powered vehicles and all that stuff. At the same time, though, you got a lot of unions.
Yeah, big union population.
And so, there's a pretty you've got like the UP Michigan
Right.
is like Hunter's, kind of like a rural area. Then you've got some decent sized cities there, so that is a very tough one.
It's almost like you got to look at the map of some of these states, right? Everything is red except the major cities is blue, right? Is that's another example of Michigan as well?
I mean, that's Illinois
that's
too.
that's the classic one you see on Twitter all the time. It's like, oh, look at this map, and it's like 80% red or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, just because like
Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin is all typically like that. It's just red, and then the
That's
city's
because all the
blue,
people
and
live
then-
in the blue.
Yeah, because the blue
the
spot
amount of
is just
people in
so
the blue
densely
are,
populated.
yeah, it's like way more than the people in the red. That is true. But Michigan, I don't know. I think Michigan is going to go blue.
That's what I was going to say.
I think
as
Michigan and
well.
Wisconsin might go blue.
So we got
both.
Arizona red, Georgia blue, Michigan blue.
Yeah. Michigan, Nevada's the next one up.
I gotta say Nevada's red.
Nevada, I would think red. It's again close to border. What was it about Vegas? Oh, no tax on tips would be big in Vegas.
Huge in Vegas, yeah.
That would be
But
absolutely-
both sides are doing that now. See, I never even thought of that. No wonder they're doing no. That's literally what that policy is no tax. The reason that's even an idea is because of Nevada, because it's a swing state. See what I'm saying?
Possibly. I don't know.
The only
So-
reason that
so-
came to mind for Trump
So is
or
this not a
Kamala.
problem with the Electoral College? Is that
No, it's a beautiful thing
is that-
about the Electoral
Okay,
College.
but they're only doing no tax on tips for this one fucking state.
Right, but if it weren't for the Electoral College, they would only be doing policies.
So who's doing policy for Wyoming? No one.
They have to. They're not designing their final policies in the final run for Wyoming, no, because they've already got them locked down. But
Right.
if they were to say, here's what we're going to do, we're going to tax Wyoming and we're going to give all that money to Nevada, they can't do that because then they lose Wyoming. So if it was no Electoral College, they can hypothetically, now this is an extreme, this probably wouldn't happen directly like this, but hypothetically, both politicians could say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to tax Alabama, we're going to tax Wyoming, we're going to tax Montana through the roof, and we're going to redistribute that money to California, Illinois, and New York. We have the three biggest cities. They would win in a landslide. You see, so it's a very good way to oppress those small states. Now, Trump and Kamala can target Nevada with the no tax on tips policy, for example, and they can target Nevada and make their campaign all about Nevada. But what they can't do is also hurt other states in their campaign, because then they would risk losing those votes. The only reason they have Wyoming is because Wyoming is voting for them based on Wyoming is a far right red state, so they don't have to risk losing Wyoming when you're on the right, and you have no chance of gaining Wyoming when you're on the left.
But if you got rid of the Electoral College, couldn't you then, in theory, couldn't someone then court those voters? I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but
though.
it's worth nothing.
It's
It's
just
worth
3.
Dude, the population of Wyoming is like what? What's
like
the population?
a million.
It's worth
like a million.
3.
It's worth 3.
It's worth 3.
Wyoming's
Wyoming's
worth
worth
3
3.
electoral college votes.
Yes.
Currently, it's worth 3 electoral college votes out of the 540, right? But if it were down to the popular vote, Wyoming would be worth like fucking negligible, like 0.05% or something.
Do we go Nevada red?
I don't know.
Yes.
I think it would be red. That one's a tough one too. I think I would go red.
I think I'd
They're
go
all
red.
tough ones. That's why they're swing states. But
Can we get Nevada filled in red?
Yeah, we got it red right now.
All right.
so what do we have? What do we have with what we have so far?
230 Republican, 263 Democrats.
And what's left?
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania,
Pennsylvania.
North Carolina.
All right. Let's do Wisconsin.
Wisconsin's tough to you.
Rust Belt.
Well, let's go North Carolina first because it's the easier one. I think North Carolina, is no
I think
doubt Trump.
red.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll make that one red. So what did it come down to? Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Republicans 246, Democrats 263. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I think Wisconsin's going to go blue personally.
If you do that, then it's over, right?
Yeah.
273.
What if you were to do? What if you were to leave open Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia? I think those are the 3.
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia.
Yeah, you leave them all neutral right now. What's the score?
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia. 247 Democrat, 246 Republican.
Dude, that's what it is right there.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 big.
Have you
ones.
seen the scenario where it's like 269, 269?
Yeah. Oh, we should. Oh, yeah.
I mean, we can't figure that out right now live. But
Probably not. But That would be okay. That's civil war.
That's civil war. That right there, that is how civil war breaks out.
That's civil war.
Because I believe it comes down to a vote in the Senate, I think is what happens. This happened on...
Who's got the Senate right now? Isn't it like 40? Isn't it like 51-49?
I think... Isn't it split right now? I think Democrats...
Is it 50-50?
I think I mean the House and the Senate. I think Democrats have one. I think Republicans have the other.
Which.
But this happened on Veep, where she's running for...
The Democrats hold a narrow majority in the U.S. Senate with 51 seats.
51-49, and then the House is probably Republicans barely, right?
I believe so. But this happened on an episode of Veep where the Electoral College couldn't decide, who was going to be. Then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate's a stalemate as well. So then it literally, you know what it comes down to?
Is it the vice president?
It's the vice president.
Oh, man.
That's civil war.
It's the vice president.
Okay. That's insane.
We got Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia as our 3 undecided.
So Pennsylvania.
At that point, it comes down to Pennsylvania, right?
Is Pennsylvania 20 delegates?
If we say it is 19.
Wisconsin's 10.
Wisconsin is 10.
Georgia's 13.
What did you say Georgia was?
13, 12?
16, but
16,
who
okay.
did you guys predict?
I think we said...
I said
I
blue.
think
I said Georgia, I think, is blue, but it's definitely a...
Yeah, you said blue because you didn't trust it?
I said blue because I don't trust the Georgians.
Because we're going to get all the mail-in ballots late.
Yeah, right.
We'll find enough for Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, at that rate, oh shit, I just clicked an accidental one. Hold on. I think I clicked Kansas.
It does come down to those 3, though, because Nevada's like nothing. Nevada's like 6. Arizona's like 5, right? Something like that. It's Georgia's 16. Wisconsin's 10. I think Michigan's like 10. And Pennsylvania's 20. Those are the 4.
Gotta love the fact that only those 4 states matter.
Only those 4 states matter right now. But now, if we keep in mind, okay, 16 years ago, or less than that, 12 years ago, Florida was a purple state.
Yeah. Is Florida deep red now?
Florida's deep red now.
Deep red.
But only because they, because that was part of Trump's win strategy in 2016.
Have you read anything about Gore Bush?
The dangling. What do they call it? The dangling chads. The dangling chads.
What's that?
It's something like, I might be saying it wrong.
Was that the punch card thing?
Yeah.
It was like a...
The dangling chads is not like a gang of like cool guys dangling around. It's talking about the punch cards. It was like if you
didn't fully
and
punch
it was still hanging on. Yeah,
it wouldn't count it. So
they
did like a hand recount, and it kept getting closer and closer. Where like the lead like was just getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and then eventually like it got so close, but then it kept moving more and more towards Gore. Bush had it, kept moving more and more towards Gore. Came down to like literally like a couple hundred votes at this point, and then the deadline happened. Like one of the districts literally gave up. One of the districts was like, "This is too much. We're not doing this." They gave up. Another one of the districts, they like ran out of time on the deadline. If those votes had gone in, then Gore would have won. But the deadline passed, and then it went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court like struck it down, saying, "No, the deadline hit. That didn't like those votes don't count." So then there was like a huge uproar, like, "Oh well, you're just gonna like not count votes towards the democratic process." That one was a complete shit show.
Honestly, the story of the dangling chads gives me a little hope because it's like at least we've been here before.
Yeah, that's true.
Like this isn't nothing new. We've always got some problems.
That's true, but could the issues have been put on display for the American people to see? Not even daily, hour by hour, minute by minute.
It's the medium. It's not. It's not the issue. It's the now. You know what I mean? The problem now is not that there's more corruption or more. It's just that there's more opportunity for the average person to see it,
right?
Or see what they think is it, and there's also more opportunity for a bad actor to manipulate the average person into believing something that might not be true. When it, like if social media existed in the time of the Gore Bush election, like
who knows?
It might have been absolute chaos in the streets,
Right, because no one could communicate together to form some sort of action. And so essentially, like you just had to accept whatever happened.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. All right, let's get down to the last one. I think this is the main one. I think the winner of this, it's going to come down to the state. I think Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it. I'm gonna say this is what the right's seeing, but there's also a good left point on Pennsylvania. It does come down to, like, if you're living in Pennsylvania right now, you're definitely the hot chick at the bar.
Yeah.
Everyone wants you.
Yeah.
You know, let me, politician, let me buy you a drink. Let me make fracking cool again. I think fracking's a big one. They're also in the Rust Belt, so same problem as Michigan. They've got, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're a big steel industry,
miners, right?
although steel's kind of down now, but they've got a lot of union workers. Trump got shot there, went back, and said, as I was saying, finished the speech. So you got some cultural stuff going on there too. I think it's pretty similar to, not really Illinois. Illinois's got one really big city. I think Pennsylvania's got two pretty big cities that add up to about the population of Chicago, being Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And the rest is kind of rural, as it is in Illinois. So you've got I think they call it the T, because you've got, so Pennsylvania is like a rectangle, right? You've got bottom right corner is Philadelphia, I believe. Bottom left corner is Pittsburgh.
We're Americans. We don't learn geography.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm just giving a little background. I believe the bottom right corner is Philadelphia. Bottom left corner is Pittsburgh, meaning that the middle and then top of the rectangle is all rural. And so that's the T, they call it. And Trump wins in the T. And
T
Trump
for
loses
Trump?
in the, T for Trump. And Trump loses in the bottom two corners. That's what I'm seeing. But the polls, if you were to go off the polls are like down to like a couple thousand votes. It's just insanely
if it's
tight.
up to
Insanely
Pennsylvania, you got Republicans 252, Democrats 267. So I think it might just come down to Pennsylvania in the end.
If you give Pennsylvania red there, that's 270, right?
Yeah, it's Jover.
It's Jover.
It's quite literally Jover.
Yeah. So it comes down to, I don't know. I think that one's too close to call.
Pennsylvania
basically
is really going to be the highlight of it, but it does. I think the bottom line, though, it's good to keep in mind is same with the Nevada thing, the no tax on tips, is when people are looking at what these politicians are saying, understand the game they're playing. So they know that Illinois is a heavy blue state, so they don't give a shit about us right now. Like we talked, like
Right.
I said, they don't give a shit about us right now. Everything they come out and say is designed to win a certain demographic of voters, which they have insane data on. They know exactly what interests them. They know exactly what they want to see in a candidate. They know exactly what drives them out to vote. They might have somebody who has been a lifelong Republican but hasn't really voted in quite a few elections. But they're able to kind of see the data and figure out, all right, what's going to get this guy fired up enough to get him to go out and vote versus, what's going to try to stifle the vote. This is all data games that they've never been able to play before until we started living in this digital world that we live in now. And so when it comes down to it, if you're watching the politicians and what they're doing, keep in mind that what they're doing is designed for a very small demographic of the country that lives in a county that is a swing county and a swing state that's going to determine the election. And then all of a sudden you start to understand this guy's not evil or stupid, and Kamala's not evil or stupid. They're just playing this game to try to win over this small group of people.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I like that. Maybe we can end it somewhere around here. What do you think would be the worst case scenario? Maybe not worst case, which would be worse for civil unrest? Do you think a Trump victory would be worse for civil unrest? Do you think a Kamala victory would be worse for civil unrest? Let's throw this to Nick first.
Oh, man, I think both of them are going to be civil unrest right off the bat. The left seems to be more vocal and the right seems to be more violent. So I'm not really sure which is the greater or lesser of two evils. I do think, though, the right is more tolerant as well. So if the left does win,
I think so.
I think that the right might be able to, there's going to be some Proud Boys getting out there. They're going to be waving the guns around. They're going to do some crazy shit. But I think generally speaking, the most of the right-leaning voters in the country are going to be okay with it at the end of the day. I think if, Trump wins, I think the left is just sort of that angry wasp nest that just got hit with a baseball bat. And I could see more discourse in just the next upcoming 4 years. So part of me is sort of like I definitely lean more right. But I think at the end of the day, if Kamala were to win, I do, I don't like that outcome, but I think for the most part, people in the country would probably be more relaxed with things, especially the left. I don't think that they would continue to be as loud and flagrant as maybe they are right now.
If I could hop in there, I think Kamala victory would cause more civil unrest because of the fact that Trump has been firing people up and spewing the rhetoric saying, if we lose, it was stolen. The left firmly believes there's a big chance that they can lose, right? The left is over anxious to a fault, right? They never have self-confidence in their own capabilities. The right, on the other hand, is fully believing right now that there's not a single chance they can lose in a free and fair election.
The radical right believes that. I don't think the right as a whole believes that.
I think both of you guys
Maybe, yeah.
I think both of you guys have some truth to what I think what you said is correct. Where I never really heard this before, but that was a really good point. Is that I can't remember the exact words you used, but the way to describe it is that there's a higher threshold for the right to start getting violent or start rioting. The right's not like if Trump wins, the left is going to riot no matter what. They're going to riot just based on the fact that he won. Now the right, if they lose an election, which the widespread narrative is that it was a fair election that we just lost. Say that's the case. Go back to 2016. If Trump loses that election against Hillary, there's no riots in the streets. Everyone gets up and goes to work the next morning. It's no problem. Trump won. There were riots in the streets. Nothing crazy, but there was some riots and things like that. The left is willing to escalate things based purely on the fact that their outcome did not come true, what they wanted. The right has a higher threshold. I will give you that I think is correct. I also think you're correct in the fact that what the media pundits in the right are currently doing and what Trump's currently doing is they are escalating the right to that threshold prematurely, where they can't say that the election was stolen from them yet because the election hasn't happened yet. There's been no evidence of it, but they're already saying, they're already revving people up under the impression that they're going to be, if Trump loses, that means there must have been cheating. So they're prematurely getting the right up to that threshold to which they do become violent. I think no matter who wins, there was no chance in hell of a peaceful transfer of power. And I think there's about a 50-50 chance of a peaceful transfer of power when it comes to whether or not the new president is sworn in without a wide-scale war. I think the chances
50-50 on wide-scale war?
maybe not like a full-on definitive like war, that's not going to go down in history books as a war. But I think mass violence in the streets, or even not even maybe physical violence in the streets, but like the secession of a state, so something wild going on. I think there's a pretty high chance of that if the people in charge currently are not capable of handling it well. I think what there's probably a 100% chance of is that there will be riots. No matter who wins, there will be riots.
Yeah, so you had said the other day that I think it's more likely that there will be some form of riots than there's not, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe that. The last week or so, I've also kind of been coming over to that side that no matter what happens, someone's going to be very upset.
Yeah,
and that is going to be played out forever. And that's the problem. It's going to be played out for everyone to see at this point.
Right, and I think what he says is correct is that the left is always going to be upset unless their guy wins. That and I don't mean to diss the left, but that you probably can acknowledge the left is going to riot pretty much no matter what if Trump wins. Normally, I think the case is that the right usually doesn't do that, but the right is more so. It's like, the left will do small riots. They'll maybe burn down a Wendy's or something, but nothing crazy. and then the right will probably not do anything until something gets to a certain point, and then they storm the Capitol and try to kidnap Pelosi. But the problem here is that the right media is not doing a service to anybody because they're hyping up the right to the point where now if Trump doesn't win, it's assumed that it's cheating. Therefore, they're already at the level where we're going to storm the Capitol. We're going to burn some shit down.
No, that's the problem. Is the rhetoric on either side right now is, if Trump wins, we just elected a dictatorial, fascist, totalitarian regime. There'll be no more elections. Trump's going to enact Project 2025 and secure power at the federal level to never allow someone to not come into power who isn't Republican. And on the other side, it's, if Kamala wins, it was completely and utterly stolen from us. There was no chance we could have lost. Now we're absolutely done for. And that's the problem, is both sides are now ramping up this rhetoric to there might not possibly be a chance of peaceful transition of power, which has been our history for 250 years, essentially. Right. That is what has made our country great, is our democratically held election process.
100% agreed on that.
That is what set us apart from most other countries, right? Obviously, democracy had been around before us, right? We stole the ideas from the
Athens,
Greeks.
Right?
Yeah. And even then, here's something I kind of want to end with. There's a big debate. Are we a republic? Are we a democracy? The right thinks that we are a republic because it sounds like Republican. And this is what they've found out, is that it literally just comes down to the word choice. Republic sounds like Republican. Democrats say we are a democracy because it sounds like Democrat. You all know the truth? We are both.
We are a democratic republic, right?
We are a constitutional republic. Let me break that down. Constitutional meaning both the government and the people have to adhere to the rules of the Constitution. A republic meaning we have a chosen set of representatives to make laws for us. We are also a democratic, we are a representative democracy, right? Representative, again, meaning
Electoral College.
Elect people to represent us in government. Democracy meaning you get to go out and physically vote. So are we a democracy? Are we a republic? We are both.
So when you vote, you're not voting for Trump. You're voting for the guy who is our representative to vote for Trump.
And that's even a little bit more nitpicky than you need to be, I think.
Right, yeah, but yeah, just so like just to clarify too, just for anyone, like when we talk about electoral college versus popular vote, the popular vote would be everyone's vote counts towards the president, and whoever gets the most votes wins. What we're doing is we're voting for our representative to cast their vote in favor of one of the two candidates. Okay, just to kind of throw that out there. But all right, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was about it. I think it's high time we try and bridge that gap between the two sides. We need to really realize that we're not supposed to be fighting each other. We're supposed to be fighting against injustice. We're supposed to be building a better society.
We're all poor.
Yeah.
And realistically, we're all poor.
So
join the left because
See, now that's a good one for the next one, because I think I joined the right, because the left, think about it this way, not to keep this thing going for much longer, but you got one party who has most of the people who are poor vote for them. You've got another party, most of the people who are rich vote for them. Both parties are fighting to get more voters. So what are their incentives? The incentive of one party is to get more poor people. The incentive of another is to get more rich people. That's why I like the right. Part of the reason I like the right is that I feel like the right, and I think policy aligns with it, is that the right will argue in favor of policy that will lift more people up out of poverty. The people who earn it through meritocracy, of course, they'll lift more people up out of poverty, whereas the left has ways where we're not going to keep you in poverty, but we're going to make sure that you're not able to really build up. But that might be an argument for another debate. One thing I think we would agree on is that after this episode and after this election, I just hope to God that we don't have to keep dealing with all this political shit, because it's fucking exhausting.
And that's one of the biggest things. I had texted Richard this maybe a week ago. I said, I'm almost done with all this shit.
I was thinking the same thing.
And that's probably where most people lie. This is overwhelming. How am I supposed to possibly keep up with all this? How am I even supposed to be informed when I can't get accurate, clear, concise information? Yeah. Everything is through a lens of bias, and I can't really get down to the heart of any of these issues.
Yeah, no, it's very, I don't know if it's because we now have a podcast that is pretty aligned with politics, so we kind of have to keep up with it, as part of what we're doing, or if this is just the most divisive, exhausting, hyperbolic election we've ever seen. But
right.
2016, I was all over it. It was fun. I was watching all the October surprises and all this stuff. And 2020 was during COVID. It was a little bit more doom and gloom, but it was still kind of exciting. It was something in the news, this one has been like, oh my God, my head hurts from watching this shit. It's insane. And I don't know if that's just because, I mean, I kind of, ever since we started the podcast, I've been looking more, keeping on top of it more, you know, just so that we can talk about it. But this one is just like, it's two people shouting at each other, really. And it's just,
and again, it goes back to people are woefully uninformed on politics, and at the same time, politics is plays far too central a role. Politics should be something that's like on the back burner, right? It's like, oh, like a new bill is being brought up. We should all go vote on this new bill being brought up, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, all right, it's not some insane political divide, some insane economical divide. It's just kind of, do you think this is right or not? You know, do you think this will make our country, our society, a better place? Or
not something like you're getting in a fight with your family about,
right.
Like never talking to your cousin or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
so I think it's, at some point, we need to bridge the gap. We need to, you know, have more open, honest conversations. Nick, any closing thoughts?
I had a conversation with an Uber driver recently, and asked him, it was just like a grown man, and I asked him, you know, with everything going on in the world and politics, you know, what do you think? He was maybe, I think he was like, you know, 50s maybe. And it's kind of a similar thing when we ask our parents, like, what do you see, what do you think after seeing so many elections, right? Because we're, you know, 25, 26 years old. We haven't seen that many. The ones that we have seen seem crazy to us. However, what this one Uber driver told me was, every single election, they always say the same thing, that it's the most important election of the time.
That is true.
It's a little bit of just that broken record kind of over and over again. So we're too young to tell. I definitely do think that there's big events going on in the world that don't happen every 4 years right now. So, you know, maybe it gives it more validity that there's crazier things happening right now. But at the same time, I do just wonder, is this just how it will always be?
Yeah.
And, you know, that's kind of the last note I like to just, you know,
good question.
think about.
Anything else,
Will it
Richie?
always be like this?
No, I think that summed it up good.
Yeah,
Every election, they say it's the most important.
Yeah.
Hey, 2028, we'll be back again for the most important election of all time, probably. You know. So
Well, if we have an
We'll
election,
see.
if we have an election, it'll be the most important one.
either that, or we'll be like living in caves trying to get by. So you know. one of those
If
two.
we don't have an election, good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck.
Cheers to that.
Modern Symposium signing off. Good discussion, boys.